Yeah, greetings and welcome again to another one of our PACM or Mojo session. And today, as you can see, we have a very esteemed panel with us today. And we have with us at the moment, we have Professor Shaka with us and also Sister Kujichagulia. We are respecting Professor Small and Professor Tafara. So as they come in, as they arrive, I'll put them into the chat. But as usual, before we get into proceedings, we'll hand you over to Ndugu Umani, who will be changing the vibrations for us.
Asante sana, Ndugu. And also, Asante sana, Asanteni sana to Jamal, Hamjambo, to all the family who are watching. And greetings as well as also we have here with us MZ Pepakai, Senior Elder of the Pan-African Congress Movement. And my name is Ndugu Imani. Ndugu means brother in Kiswahili. Kiswahili is the language that we use in Pan-African Congress Movement, because at the 6th Pan-African Congress, it said that when we have a united Africa in whatever formation that we decide upon, that the best language we could use as a lingua franca would be Kiswahili, because so many of our people speak it so across the continent. So, but having respect for all the languages and cultures that already exist in Africa, but a way that we can all speak in an African tongue with each other. So that's why we use Kiswahili. So we're going to start with a ritual that we call Mabadiliko ya Nishati in Kiswahili, which means the changing of energy. And it's a form of libation, but with the libation we can use many things: alcohol, water, and energy. And this we're going to be using our energy because this is something that I created. The ancestors helped me to create, and from the guidance of other practitioners, so that when we're in this space, in this virtual space, we can still join each other through spirit and energy, even though we don't have the pleasure of being in a company as we would love to be. But we still, as we are one vibration, still able to connect with each other. And this reinforces that and gives us our ritual. So as African spirituality isn't dogma, it's about love and sharing and becoming into our own authentic selves. Please, if you wish to take part, please do. But if you don't, that's absolutely fine. Please watch. This is not only us reinforcing our culture and energy, but it's also a teaching tool. So everything that I say, you'll see translations in English. So some things are used in Kiswahili, some are Kemetic terms, and some have the terms from the tradition of Vodon. But if you wish to just listen and watch, that's absolutely fine. If you wish to take part, please do. So, but before we begin, we need to get ourselves into the right frame of mind and right spirit. And so we're going to use our breath to do that. So we're going to breathe together, because breath is that link between our physical state and our spiritual state. Breath is life and breath is life. So as we do so, I will count in Kiswahili, and as we breathe, what we're going to do is we're going to breathe out and expel the air from our lungs. As we do, we're going to pull our stomachs in. This is sometimes called pot belly breathing. Pull our stomachs in, and that forces the air out. And then we relax our stomach, and it forces the air into our nose, and that'd be 1. Okay. And the spirits tell me that we'll do that 4 times. 4, because that's a number for foundation, for growth, a spiritual number for growth, for abundance and health. Okay. But before I do anything and start, I have esteemed elders in front of me, my own elder, MZ Pepakai, and of course, MZ Shaka and Dada Kujichagulia. So do I have your permission to begin before I start?
You do.
All right, Asante Sana, Asante Sana. So we're going to begin. Asante Sana means thank you very much in Kiswahili. So what we're going to do, and Mzee means elder, and Dada means sister. Okay, so before we start, as we're going to begin, if we can sit straight in whichever seat we're in, palm of hands on our thighs, back straight, so our spine is straight, so that our 7 energy centers that the Hindu Kush called chakra are in line. I'm going to close our eyes, and we're going to breathe out through our mouth by pulling the stomach in. So if we close our eyes or keep our eyes open, if you feel comfortable, breathe out. Hold it, relax, breathe in. Moja. Breathe out. Relax and breathe in. Mbili. Breathe out. Hold it. Relax. Breathe in. Tatu. Should always start to feel calmer, more centered. Breathe out. Hold it. Relax and breathe in. In there. We can open our eyes now. And so now we should feel more centered, more present, be focused on where we are now, what we're doing, rather than what's happened to us or where we're going, but here, and away from where our enemies want us to be, which is to be animalistic, emotional, and reactive, but calm and centered in full possession of our power. So, as I said, Mabadiliko Yintati, I'm an African spiritual life coach, and so this is something that I do every day, and I share this with the organization. So, I'm going to share my screen. Ndugu. There we go. Let me know when everyone can see that.
Yeah, hold on, let me. Yep.
Oh, okay.
Okay. And so if you can't see it, I'll be reading it out so you can follow. Okay, so Mabadiliko ya Nishati, change of energy. So to change the energy or vibration, we now thank the powers to ask that we have a closer connection with them and they assist us in manifesting our objectives. In order to do that, we're going to bring this, play this triangle chime. Triangle, these three sides are very spiritual number of creation, of energy, of being coming into being. I'm going to ring it, Spirit tells me 7 times. 7, because 7 is the spiritual number for wisdom, seeking, and truth. And we see it so many times through all existence. 7 days of the week, 7 layers to the skin, 7 openings to the body, 7 of Ninguza Saba, 7 laws of Tahuti. So we're going to ring it 7 times as we do. Continue to breathe deeply. Leave your eyes open or closed as you feel. And let the vibration go around you, through you, and over you. As you do that, it opens up our consciousness, our third eye. And as we open up that consciousness and join with universal consciousness, the all, we join with each other wherever we may be in the world. So now I'll begin, and I'll count in Kiswahili to keep time. And I'll begin. Moja. Mbili. Tatu. Ine. Tano. Sita. Saba. Okay, we continue with the ritual. And so we're invocating these powers, these energies. They're not outside of us, they're within us. So here we come to the call and response. So I'll begin, and then we'll say together, Sisi ni kitu kimoja. Yeah, Sisi ni kitu kimoja, which in Kiswahili means we are one or we are the same thing. A very powerful affirmation that we are bringing into being and understanding. So, ninaomba ya muumba au wote. I call upon the Creator or the All. Sisi ni kitu kimoja. Ninaomba ya nebacha.
Sisi ni kitu kimoja.
Now, one of the Lawa of the Buddha tradition. Ninaomba kanuni na nguvu. I call upon the principle and power of Mami Wata.
Sisi ni kitu kimoja.
And now on to the underlying principles of all existence, essence of the all, the Creator. Ninaomba kanuni na nguvu ya Shu. Sisi ni kitu kimoja. Ninaomba kanuni na nguvu ya Tefnut. Sisi ni kitu kimoja. Ninaomba kanuni na nguvu ya Nut. Sisi ni kitu kimoja. And then we go on to the Paut Netaru, the Kemetic tree of life, the spiritual science to bring the human being into balance with all existence, and thereby bringing ourselves into balance, we bring existence into balance, our divine purpose. Ninaomba kanuni na nguvu ya Geb.
Sisi ni kitu kimoja.
Ninaomba kanuni na nguvu ya Auset.
Sisi ni kitu kimoja.
Ninaomba kanuni na nguvu ya Sebek.
Sisi ni kitu kimoja.
Ninaomba kanuni na nguvu ya Hetaru.
Sisi ni kitu kimoja.
Ninaomba kanuni na nguvu ya Haru.
Sisi ni
kitu kimoja. Ninaomba kanuni na nguvu ya Herakuti.
Sisi ni kitu kimoja.
Ninaomba kanuni na nguvu ya Maat. Sisi ni kitu kimoja. Ninaomba kanuni na nguvu ya Sekou.
Sisi ni kitu kimoja.
Ninaomba kanuni na nguvu ya Tahuti.
Sisi ni kitu kimoja.
Ninaomba kanuni na nguvu ya Ausa.
Sisi ni kitu kimoja.
Ninaomba kanuni na nguvu ya Amen.
Sisi ni
kitu kimoja. And now that we've already given thanks and recognition to the first ancestor, the All, we now can call upon those ancestors in our direct bloodline who we should never forget. So I'll begin. Ninaomba Mami yangu, my mother, Audrey Mae Kelly. Sisi ni kitu kimoja. Please, brothers and sisters, if you have people in your bloodline you wish to call into our presence, please do.
Lord, return to Milton Holmes, Andy Thompson.
Sisi ni kitu
kimoja.
William and Sylvia Bradley.
Sisi ni kitu kimoja.
Gladys Lloyd, Charles Lloyd, Daryl Lloyd, Terrence Lloyd.
Sisi ni kitu kimoja. Ninaomba Aislinn Rattigan, mother. Ninaomba Sylvester Rattigan, grandfather. Ninaomba Ruth James, great grandmother.
Sisini Kitu
Kamoja.
Brian King and Damian King, my son and grandson.
Sisini Kitu
Kamoja.
Nyamba, grandfather James, grandmother Amy, grandfather Waldy, and grandmother Daisy.
Sisini Kitu Kamoja.
Isabel Legard, my grandmother. I named earlier my mother and father and my two brothers who have passed. Isabel Legard.
Sisini Kitu Kamoja.
Kamoja. And then the grandmother Louise Hines.
Sisini Kitu Kamoja.
Kamoja.
Kamal Saitu has been passed away.
Sisini Kitu Kamoja.
Nyamba Antimiri.
Sisini Kitu Kamoja. Okay, there's no one else? That's absolutely fine. And so now we can go on to those ancestors who have left us a tremendous legacy, who gave their lives, their time, their effort for the liberation of our people. I'll begin. Nina Omba, MZ, the Honorable Marcus Mazar Garvey. Sisini Kitu Kamoja.
Nyambo Harriet Tubman.
Sisini Kitu Kamoja.
Nanaomba, Brother Tagel, Brother Doggy, and Sister Jan.
Sisini Kitu Kamoja.
Kamoja.
Dada Mary Ellen Pleasant.
Sisini Kitu Kamoja.
Kamoja.
Nyambo Babatunde.
Sisini Kitu Kamoja.
Kamoja. Nanaomba, Sheikh Amadou Bamba, and Helen Saturi Jata.
Sisini Kitu Kamoja.
Kamoja.
Nyambo Beretene, Bada Berenge. Sisini Kitu
Kamoja.
Kamoja.
Anyone else wish to call? No? Okay. And so then now we can call upon those ancestors who we don't always know their names, but they left us that tremendous legacy of their commitment and their fight, and for us to learn, and those that we should never forget. The ones we first should call upon are those of the Mangamazi. Ninaomba Mababuya Mangamazi. Sisini Kitu Kamoja.
Kamoja.
Ninaomba Mababuya Asian Revolution. Sisini Kitu Kamoja.
Kamoja.
Ninaomba Mababuya Gula Vita, those who fought in the Gula Wars. Sisini Kitu Kamoja.
Kamoja.
Ninaomba Mababuya Taifa la Mosai, the Mosai Nation. Sisini Kitu Kamoja.
Kamoja.
Ninaomba Mababuya Wataya Kori, that's what the brothers and sisters in Australia call themselves. Now Papua New Guinea, now West Papua, now Tasmania, now Dravidians. Sisini Kitu Kamoja.
Kamoja.
Ninaomba Mababuya APLA, now SWAPO, now Freedom and Land Party, now Black Panthers. Sisini Kitu Kamoja. Ninaomba Mababuya. Yes, Ninaomba Mababuya Mataifa ya Kemet, na Taseti, na Kush, na Nubia. Sisini Kitu
Kamoja.
And then our first peoples, the first civilizers. Ninaomba Mababuya Watu ya San, na Twa, na Hutu. Sisini Kitu Kamoja.
Kamoja.
Ninawaomba wanaishi ambao watatutetea sisi, na wale mababu ambao bado hawajazaliwa. Sisi ni kitu kimoja.
Kitu kimoja.
And we end on the affirmations and words of power that we say with the energy. And we shall be bring them our words and power, our vibration, and bring them into being. So thus follow after me. Nguvu zote kwa watu wetu, mapenzi ya wote ni mapenzi yetu, hakuna mwanzo na hakuna mwisho. Anuk, amen.
Amen.
All power to our people. The will of the all is our will. There is no beginning and there is no end. I am, amen. Asanteni sana, Jamal.
Asante sana.
Asante sana, Ndogramani, and thank you very much, Asante sana, for that.
I just want to say, just before I leave, it's so honor to see you, MZ, Baba Smalls, and some of what you saw there is because of your teaching. So thank you very much for helping me on my journey.
Thank you for being on your journey.
Asante.
Asante sana.
Okay, I will leave you now until the end to close this meeting with the ending ritual. So have a good session. I'll be listening, and love and peace and honor.
Asante.
Honor.
Asante sana. Okay. Yes, and I'd like to welcome everybody again to this Sunday, the PSCM Mimosa sessions. These are sessions by the PSCM that take place each Sunday between the hours of 6 and 8 Greenwich Mean Time. Now, this session has been going on in this format since the lockdown in March of last year. But the PSCM as a whole have been running these sessions on a Sunday since 1975. And the PSCM itself is an organization that grew out of the 6th Pan-African Congress held in Dar es Salaam in 1974, when a delegation from the UK attended that conference. It was a delegation of individuals from various organizations, but on returning, the impact that the conference made on them, gave them the impetus to come together to form a new organization to promote Pan-Africanism. So the PSCM itself was born in 1975. It was originally termed the Pan-African Committee, but whereas in 1977 it adopted the name the Pan-African Congress Movement. One of the things the PSCM took away from the 1974 Congress was the practice of African Liberation Day. And since then, the PSCM has deemed the practice to introduce African Liberation Day onto these shores. So from 1975 up until present day, the PSCM has faithfully celebrated African Liberation Day each year. Another of the celebration it took on very early in its founding was Kwanzaa. And again, from it started Kwanzaa back in 1972, before the PSCM was formed by various other organizations, it has been a continuous thing. So we are very much a Pan-Africanist organization, and we do have branches up and down the country, and it is our aim to liaise and link with fellow sister Pan-African organization throughout the Pan-African world. So it's an honor to have these esteemed guests today, Dr. Obiti Shaka, Sister Kujichagulia, and Professor Small. And Obiti Shaka and Professor Small are no strangers to the Pan-African Congress movement. They've been to many of our meetings, our conferences, our LD celebrations, and it's always a great pleasure to have them. So I welcome you on board today, Sister Kujichagulia, and I hope it's the start of a great journey with us. Okay, so as we open up the floor now, I have a series of questions which I will pose, and also the viewers who are watching in will also be sending in questions and comments for us to address also. So as we can see, the theme today of the discussion is the implication of the Biden-Harris administration on the African American community, or the Black American community, and the Pan-African community worldwide in general. Now, I've used certain terms, and it'd be helpful if those can be expanded upon when the questions are answered, for the simple reasons these are terms that's coming up, terms such as ADOS, terms such as foundational African Americans. Now, these are terms that some of us are grappling with. How did they come about, and what do they actually mean and stand for? So hope you'll be able to give us a better insight into them. So the first question I'd like to pose, and I'll just put it up on screen now. And it's what is the overall feeling of the African American or Black American community regarding Biden's and Harris's, regarding Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, as regard to them? Is it one of support? Is it one of indifference? Or is it one of hostility? So that's the first question I'd like to pose. So I think if I start off with Dr. Shaka, Obiti Shaka, I'll start off with you. So if you'd like to start the ball rolling by addressing that first, please.
Yeah, Brother Small, it's good to see you, brother.
Good to see you, sir. Kujichagulia. It's been
Yes,
a
my brother. I haven't seen you since the World Conference of Racism, but
I know.
good to see you against racism. Yes.
Yeah, to start this off, what is the overall feeling in the African American or Black American community regarding the Biden-Harris? Is it one of support, indifference, or hostility? Well, first of all, the Biden-Harris administration is a creation largely of the power of Black people in this country, and then a coalition of Latinos, Asians, and Native Americans, and 37% of whites in the Democratic Party that supported that. But Blacks played the leading role, and the main reason was of Trump. And Trump had brought on what I'd call a viruside. His handling of COVID-19 has been a form of genocide. I call it viruside, that is genocide through a virus. And he did everything wrong, which was he did almost nothing. And he also racialized the virus, and largely because he refused to do any kind of testing, any kind of mandates on mass social distancing, and any kind of national program, because this is a pandemic, it's global, and it really requires a global response, but at least a national response. And once he saw that the people who are dying were Black and Latino, he decided to do nothing. and then said he would delegate it to the states and blame the states. And then he did, with his racist mindset, apparently didn't understand that the virus wasn't racist like him. It was non-discriminatory. And so then it began to kill whites in the blue states. But because they're blinded by racism, they said he didn't handle this right. The overwhelming majority of people in the country said he didn't handle this virus or this COVID-19 right, but they didn't blame him. That was the white people. Black people blamed him, brown people blamed him, red people blamed him, yellow people blamed him, and a minority of intelligent white people blamed him. And so the major motive behind the campaign, what became Biden-Harris, was COVID. And then the major force that enabled us to put him out was Black Lives Matter, because it was that motion in the ocean that created motion in 50 states and 50 countries, and that created an activism that spilled over into the election. And that activism activated a lot of folks. It shifted opinion even among some whites, but it particularly activated youth. And so Biden, who's a white racist candidate, he was the white president. Trump was swept out by a coalition led by blacks. So when you ask what's the black attitude, blacks put him there. So this is the key point to understand. Biden had a weak campaign when he was running for president. He lost money and support because, frankly, he's over the hill in terms of age. Even Obama had told him not to run, and he had a joke on the side, watch out, he'll F up. And then during the campaign, he was saying all the old people should drop out. That was mainly aimed at Bernie Sanders because Obama's a moderate and did not like the radical policies of Bernie Sanders. But he was also telling Biden he should get out. But what happens in South Carolina is when nobody's doing well and Biden is doing terrible, he hasn't won a single primary, black people in South Carolina rescued him. Then the Democratic Party establishment got behind him and told all other candidates to drop out because none of them were doing that well anyway, including Buttigieg, who's the first gay candidate for president, has now been nominated into his administration. So it was with that, but it was the victory that he achieved in South Carolina that gave him the base for that. And it was clear that it was the black base that would sail him to the presidency. And so he knew then he had to make a commitment to pick a black candidate for vice president. And then he also knew this: black women had emerged as the strongest force among blacks, both in Black Lives Matter and in the whole electoral politics campaign of getting out the vote. As you've seen in Georgia, it got flipped from red to blue. And there was a bunch of networks in Georgia that black networks that mobilized that black vote. So it was the black vote that did it, along with the Asian, Latino, Native American, and a minority of whites. But blacks drove it. So, but in terms of the overall attitude in the beginning, the attitude was indifferent towards Harris because of her being involved as a prosecutor and whatnot. And Biden was not the top choice of most people in this country. However, in South Carolina, he was because of his association with Obama. And that was a mainstream kind of, or the moderate group, but, you know, Southern blacks. But they also had the smarts to know he could probably win. So the overall attitude is his base is coming from blacks and people of color, and the Democratic Party has generally ignored that base. And largely the reason why that black base mobilized was through a black effort, not through the Democratic Party's effort. So that's what I would say overall about that. Now, within the Black community, you have radical Blacks, you have moderate Blacks, you have a few conservative Blacks, very few. So those views will be all over the place, but in general, there's real support for the Biden-Harris administration, but it's critical support. It's a support that's saying that if you want to keep our support, you're going to have to do certain things.
Okay, that's great. So I don't know. We can go on now to Professor Small. The same question.
Over pretty much laid it out. I just want to say that it was South Carolina that took Obama over when he was up against Clinton, because Clinton made the wrong statement towards Dr. Martin Luther King, and the Black people of South Carolina wiped out of the race. And there is a Black Bible Belt that runs from South Carolina through to Texas, along the Gulf of Mexico and into Middle America. And if South Carolina voted a certain way, that Bible Belt votes that way heavily. That's also the foundation of the movement that Dr. King built in the South. And so once that Southern Black vote, where the majority of our people still live, and made that move, the rest of the Black community is going to take heed. We did it twice for Obama, and we did it again with this man. I don't think most Blacks who are conscious of politics are under any illusion about what a president or a vice president can do. There is a government in the United States. It's made up of the Senate, the House of Representatives, the president, vice president, and then there's another government. And that part of the government involves 9,000 plus people whose core leadership is appointed and approved by the president and that Congress. So these are the people who manage and direct all of the other aspects of government that really writes policy, do policy, makes policy, and presents it to the president. And we rarely know their names. And unless we pay attention to that part in terms of these appointees, we are happy to see the appointees in the cabinet. That's very visible, immediate. But the appointees of all of these other agencies and programs that administer the policy and the will of the government on a daily basis, we rarely pay attention to. And I may be exaggerating or not saying enough. We're talking about 9,000 people. And then you have other aspects. You've got 28 intelligence agencies in America. We like to say the CIA. But that's the umbrella. See, there's 28 intelligence apparatus in this country. And then we've got the FBI and all of its appendages, okay? And then we like to talk about the State Department and the Pentagon, but nobody ever asks, what's in it? Who are these people? What are they doing? So this is a massive government. I was never once afraid that Trump would not step down, because over and I know you either step down or they'll lay you down, because you're not really the government.
That's right.
You are the managing instrument. You are the protocol officer. You have been elected to be the drum major and to carry out policy in the public sphere. But the people making these policies, we never even know their names.
That's right.
The people writing even these speeches, people, we don't know them. What we do know is thanks to the work of Black Lives Matter, and I give Black Lives Matter their due, but there was 1,000 other Black organizations, small ones, big ones, involved, and we call them in terms of umbrella, all Black Lives Matter, even though they had varied ideologies. We need to thank all of them, and thanks Black Lives Matter for allowing for that unity to take place under their umbrella, because that's important. Because at the end of the day now, we have to do something we haven't done very well before. Help write the policies that's going to affect our communities. And if there's any advantage to having the multiple blacks in the cabinet, that's one of the main advantages. And working with the Senate and the House of Representatives, because if we can't make sure that the policies we want is in the hands of the people who implement them, we're going to be in trouble. Because this is the fundamental question of value system and ideology. The ideology in America is that of racism, classism, and casteism, with us at the bottom. That hasn't changed with this election. The possibility of some change has occurred, but that hasn't changed. Mainly because most of the people that got elected don't understand what racism is. You know, they don't even understand classism, even on the right, when they're talking about socialists and leftists. They don't even understand. They practice this classism every day. They practice this racism. It's a part of the ideology of state. It is the culture of the government. And how do we change that? And I think that's one of our key things. How do we change that? And how do we make sure that the agenda that the government is undertaking includes proposals from us that we think will affect significant change in the Black community? And I'm not into the people of color thing. That's cool. But all of the other ethno community that we lump under people of color have a base, have a foundation. They are organized, you see. And we, the African American, is the only nation in America that don't have an external national base. The Puerto Ricans can go back to Puerto Rico, Mexicans can go to Mexico, the Nigerians can go to Nigeria, the Ghanaians can go to Ghana. We got no place to go except as the guest of somebody. So our attitude on how to continue to build a nation within a nation have not truly been expressed in terms of electoral politics in the way I think it could be, and eventually I'm sure it will be, without becoming an antagonistic force. But people really don't understand the African Americans' place and role in the American system. Even African Americans don't. And it's been a problem. And so I see some of your other questions coming up. That will explain why an ADOS can arrive and the other thing can arise. But we'll get to that when we get there. But I think there's an opportunity in this new administration for some significant progress on the part of America as a whole in dealing with systemic racism, on the part of the African American in dealing with the responsibility to build their ethnic nation as all other ethnic nations have built themselves. This is not a monolith in America. It is a relationship between multiple ethnic nations. And we're the weakest ethnic nation economically and culturally. We should be the absolute strongest. Politically, we always raise our voice, as we just did in this election. We did twice for Obama, to show we have that kind of political will and power. But we don't have the economic and cultural strength that would let us stand alone as the Indians stand alone and the Jews stand alone and the Mexicans stand alone and the Italians stand alone, and yet still are Americans.
Okay. So, Sister Kujichagulia, like to?
Well, a lot of, the truth has been told, as Dr. Shaka and Smalls have said. Basically, the people in the Black people population in the United States aren't as politicized as most would like them to be. People are basically just totally relieved that Donald Trump is no longer the president, number one. Number two, again, how much can Biden and Harris do? We already have had one Black president. So a female Black vice president cannot do more than one male Black president. However, they don't have the power. They are the mouthpiece. They are the facade of the government. As Dr. Smalls was saying, there are a bunch of other organizations and corporations. And if we don't look at the corporations who actually control the country and the policies of the country, because everything is based on capitalism. And capitalism, as we know, created racism. So the objective of America has always been to protect and serve. Protect racism, serve the interest of capitalism. So everything that happens in the government is done with those two missions in mind. Whatever it is, racism is always protected, and capitalism, the interests of capitalism, are served. So if it had not been, I want to go back to all those people who are out protesting against racism, protesting against injustice around the world. That forced Biden to choose Kamala Harris as his running mate. Had to put someone Black, and it didn't hurt that she was a female. So that was all part of the plan to get the vote. However, the vote does not change racism, does not change capitalism. Until we start looking at this very real foundation of white psychopathy, which is the foundation of racist capitalism based on white psychopathy, nothing is really going to change. We are sitting still on the Titanic. It doesn't matter who's at the helm. It doesn't matter what group is where. The ship is going down. And our job is to rescue as many of us as possible. Unfortunately, most of us do not understand racism, and we do not understand our cultural heritage and connection and the power that we have to change the world, which is why it is not taught anywhere or promoted. So our job, I see very clearly for me, I like to focus on the root of the problem. Once we kill the root, the tree dies. So you cannot have a racist tree standing if we kill the root of white psychopathy. And I want to be clear about white psychopathy. It's a term, excuse me, that I use because I refuse to call psychopathy supremacy. There's nothing supreme about a mental illness. So psychopathy is actually an antisocial mental disorder of extreme egoism, narcissism, and a lack of empathy for others. It is distinguished by a persistent attitude of the violation of the human, civil, and social rights of other human beings. So this is how America was founded. This is America's religion. Divide and conquer is how we got here. Divide and conquer is how we stay here. And as we go into the conversation of these different groups with different names, it comes back to the reality of divide and conquer, because we have not learned how to unify ourselves since we have been so terribly destroyed with the dysfunction of white psychopathy. So we have got to learn how to, number one, start labeling ourselves and stop accepting all the other titles and labels others give to us. We have been told that we do not have economic wealth and power. We have a lot of economic power. We give it away. African Americans rank 12th in the world as a nation financially. We have almost $2 trillion of spending power. But what do we do with that spending power? We give it away to designers and all kinds of things that do not support us as a people and finance our ability to move forward in liberty and freedom for ourselves. The main thing that we have got to do, because every second we are speaking, every child, people are being programmed into the myth of white psychopathy. So now you take an office, it doesn't matter what that office is or what your job title is, your framework, your mentality is based in white psychopathy. Until we destroy the myth of white supremacy, there's very little that's going to change in terms of racism, because racism is based on the myth of white supremacy. And I always say that, the myth of white supremacy. We cannot say those two words without putting the myth or the lie in front of it, because saying white supremacy, we reinforce or we enable that concept to live. We have to be clear, this is white psychopathy. And this psychopathy is an illness and a sickness that is destroying the entire planet, which has got everyone on the planet living in dysfunction. And until we realize that and come back to the reality of our humanness, as we did in the beginning, centered ourselves in our spirit, very little that we do is going to be long lasting, or it's going to really affect change. Until we eliminate the root of all of these ills, this tree will continue to bear fruit. And my job is to kill the root.
Okay, that's fine. So finally, a voice from, say, outside the States now, Elder Pepperkai. Can you give a brief answer to how you see things? Hold on, you're still muted.
Let me begin by saying how happy I am to be in this gathering, because when we look at this topic and who to invite to bring on, my head
is not sure that noise is coming. All right, could everybody who's not speaking just mute, please, and just see if it's... Okay, it's all right, I've done it. Okay, carry on.
The knot is still there.
Yeah, I think everybody is mute. Let me see. Let me just... Yeah. Everybody's muted. Yeah, oh, it's all right. It's gone now.
Yes. Let me continue by saying how happy and pleased I am, because we want to make sure we had at least one female. And I don't know where we find the sister from, but she's standing for 10 females. I'm glad to have her. Let me also say that Brother Taka mentioned how far back our relationship with Obati goes. This relationship, a special relationship that goes back over 45 years. We're very good at starting relationships. We're very poor in maintaining them. So I'm very happy and pleased. I haven't seen my good brother for over 10 years, and him look more younger today than when I last saw him. He knows how to look after himself, and I'm so pleased to see him. In this special relationship, the Pan-African Congress Movement and PAPO, Pan-African People's Organization, have worked closely over the years, to the point when PAPO would organize ALD to coincide, so Obati and Sister Nacha, the Shaka, would fly over to the UK and take part in ALD. That's how close, that's how special, and that's the reward that we've reaped and benefit from that relationship. And the reason why I pick up this book and held in my hand, which is Shaka's book he mentioned, is because the words that come out of our sister's mouth when she talk about white psychopath, whatever the term is, I'll have to write it down and get the right spelling, because supremacy is a misnomer. It didn't exist. And what the sister says on the button, it's a virus, it's a disease. That's what it is. And the sister put it into perspective. And if she said nothing more for the rest of the day, she made a contribution 1,000,000 times. And I'm so happy. Now, let me go on to my brother Small, because I met him years ago when Dr. Ben invited me up to City College to have lunch. And when I got there, it was Dr. Ben, Dr. Clark, Professor Jeffries, and Professor Small, and Scobie. And Professor Small was a baby at the family at that time, and no big old man, you know. And in fact, our sister who come here today is stopped it with a gathering of old men. But I remember in the Staines book of that title that these old men got together, decided to do something that they haven't been done before. Now, these two warrior scholars, they're veterans, and there's nothing we can think of that they haven't done. I mean, as I said, Shaka is a brilliant academic, a brilliant professor, a brilliant warrior scholar, and although I'm a boy compared to him in age, although I look as old as him, he's my teacher, a brother who I love, respect, and I used to make about 4 or 5 trips to the States yearly and to buy books. And when I landed in New York, I said, Shaka, I'm here. Shaka said, look, make sure you come down and see us. And when I think of Sister Nassa's food, I get up down there quick. I do miss a trip. So it's lovely to see him. I love to see my brother Small. Let me try to answer the question. And it's good that my brother Shaka, my brother Small, and my beloved sister have answered the question. But let me say this, because we people are very good at reacting without study. And Brother Shaka made it quite crystal clear that had it not been for African American, Biden would not be where he is. But what did we get out of? What are we going to get out of it? Did we sit down with him and make demands? We damn well didn't. We're so glad to get rid of Trump. And as far as I'm concerned, nasty and vicious and evil and wicked as Trump is just a different wing of the same bird. They both fly the same way. They both defend white privilege, white genocide, white murder, white criminality, all of it. And sometimes I wonder, nasty as Trump is Biden any different? Because while Trump may move this pandemic a bit slower, Biden will accelerate it. And in fact, I really want to know what African Americans are thinking and doing around this COVID-19 issue. Because as far as I can see, that's the biggest threat. That's the biggest threat. Because the vaccine is the biggest false flag ever. It's bigger than September 11. Because what we're not looking at, what do they mean by the 4th Industrial Revolution? What do they mean by reset? What do they mean by Agenda 21? And that must be our focus, because the vaccine is a false flag. In fact, calling it vaccine is a misnomer. It's not a vaccine. This is something that they put together, pathogen. In fact, I've got it written down, and I'll pick it up and address it in a while. Because we is the fool. Because we don't study. We don't look at things in detail. We just react. So I'm saying, and when you think about Kamala Harris, she don't even know who she is.
All right. Hold on, we've got a series of questions coming up that will address that. So let me move on to the next question then. Yeah, and is that it? Yeah. And the next question is, you just mentioned that. So it says, many African Americans, Black Americans, community do not regard Kamala Harris as Black. So what's your view on that situation? Because I've watched many of, I've been trying to follow what's happening, and I've watching many of the times that that's been coming up. So what's your overall view on that situation?
Let me start.
Well, where we start, well, when it just finished, because you just finished answering, so let me go back around. Let me go back to over T.
Okay, I'll give way.
Okay. On the one hand, there's the political issue that when she was a candidate running for president and then had to drop out. Progressive blacks and progressive everybody else had trouble with her because she was a prosecutor and failed to prosecute a single police person, and also became state attorney general. And so there was a view, and I think it was a correct view, that she was not the best candidate, as there was a view that Biden wasn't in the primaries in the beginning. So that's the political thing. But then there's the complexity of that, because when she was district attorney, she did take a stand against capital punishment. And that stand was extremely unpopular. And in fact, when the sitting senator, Dianne Feinstein, who had formerly been mayor of San Francisco, presided over a funeral of a white cop killed by a black man, which rarely happens. It's blacks who are getting killed by cops all the time. She chewed her out. So on that, she stood on a principle. Now, it was smart also because she knew that the population in San Francisco was against the death penalty. So also, she wasn't going to lose an election campaign on that. But I'm going to say this. I know some things about Kamala Harris that hardly nobody else knows. I'm going to share a few things with you. And I'm not going to say she's the spook who sat by the door, because she made a career decision that she saw as a power decision, and it proved to be smart, but at the same time, not the decision that most black people would make. But here's the key point. A lot of this view that you're running now comes from what I call the ignornet. There is the infonet, there's the Afronet, and there's the ignornet. My wife keeps me appraised of this ignornet. Now, she's Afrocentric, so don't get me wrong, but she listens to everybody. And so the ignornet is constantly talking about she isn't this, she isn't that. I heard some pork chop eating Negro talking about she married to a Jew, she ain't black, but he's a Zionist. And then my wife is showing me his following, 1 million followers. That's the ignornet. So let me tell you a few things about her and her socialization. And this is not, I'm not endorsing her, I'm not opposing her, I'm just giving you a description of some stuff you don't know, hardly nobody knows. I was interviewed by the New York Times on Kamala Harris because I led the San Francisco Freedom Movement. That movement was the mother movement of all movements in California. It preceded the Black Panther Party. It gave birth to the Experimental College that was a forerunner of Black Studies at San Francisco State. It radicalized white students at UC Berkeley and led to the free speech movement. And Kamala Harris's mother and father who comes from Jamaica and ended up becoming a leading leftist economist, Marxist-oriented economist, first to be tenured at Stanford, black person to be tenured, and her mother, who comes from India, who's as black as midnight, but she's Indian, and she's mixed, within the Indian setting, but she comes from the Brahmin caste, but a progressive family. Those two meet at UC Berkeley in 1960, and this is what you haven't heard, because they have never put a name on this. Kamala Harris will say she was moved around in a stroller during the Black Freedom Movement of the 60s, which I led, but she was a baby. And that's her discussion of the politics. She's smart. She's not telling what really happened. But what really happened was her mother and father joined a study group at UC Berkeley called the Afro-American Association. And it was formed at the very beginning of the formation of the Afro-American Association. It was formed on UC Berkeley after Malcolm X had been brought out to speak, and the university had opposed it. They had him speak at the YMCA off campus. And then a guy named Donald Warden challenged the brother who was in charge of the NAACP, who brought Malcolm out, to a debate. He later became a vice chancellor of the UC system. He was a student to a debate on the issue of Black nationalism versus integration. And he basically argued, what would Oakland look like? What would the South look like when it was desegregated? And he said it would look like Oakland. He won that debate. And then out of that formed a study group, the Afro-American Association. And that was then just a study group before it became the Afro-American Association. And it had a left wing that was very radical. It had kind of a more conservative wing that Donald Worden represented in between. At its peak, when it becomes an organization, it had over 300 members. It had Huey Newton in it. It had Maulana Karenga in it. Ron Dellums in it. A guy named Judge Ramsey. It had some very conscious Black folks, grassroots as well as intellectual. It also had a brother in it who's a friend of mine. His name is Aubrey Labrie, who became an attorney, went to the same law school as Donald Worden, later named El Mansour. And he would have a close connection to Kamala Harris's mother and father. And he would play a major role in the socialization, not him, but his family and him, in the socialization of Kamala Harris. The mother and father, they were socialized and politicized by the Afro-American Association into African-American history, African-American culture, African-American politics. So what people don't know is the knowledge that the mother had, because she ends up raising the child. The father wanted co-custody when they divorced, but racism prevented that. He's very proud of his wife, of his daughter, and I'm sure he contributed to sending her to Howard. And notice, if she ain't Black, why'd she go to Howard? Because the mother and father both went to a white university, which was fine. It's the premier university in the United States and in the world, produces more Nobel laureates than anywhere else, but it's kind of white-itis when it comes to anything conscious. They got their consciousness through this Afro-American Association. So what I'd say is the mother got an in-depth understanding of African-American history and culture that is deeper than most Black parents have. That's point number one. She made the decision that her daughter would not be socialized as an Indian, but as a Black child, and told her that was it. And my friend Aubrey Labrie, part of whose library has been donated to me by him a couple of years ago, who was in charge of a magazine called Black Dialogue. And this was put together in the 70s. It was one of the most conscious political publications in the United States. And he was an acolyte of Malcolm X. You understand? So when the mother and the father divorced, and she lives in the Bay Area, Oakland, Berkeley, she goes to Aubrey Labrie. Aubrey Labrie then hooks her up with his aunt. And the aunt becomes the person that, first of all, schools them through preschool, hooks them up into a Black church. The Bible that Kamala Harris used, she had two Bibles. One was from this aunt. So, yeah, she's got the Indian connection. When she was elected, when she was running for Attorney General, she sent back prayers. She sent to her relatives in India to pray in the temple for her victory. And by the way, India is a civilization founded by Blacks. You understand? And it's the Indo-Aryans who conquered it later, but because they had to marry with Blacks and they call themselves Aryan, Aryans won't accept them because they ain't hardly white. But they do have this Aryan culture. But this daughter, her mother, had a different view. So I understand that, and later her boyfriend was Willie Brown, who was Speaker of the Assembly, the most powerful Black person in California. I know Willie. We made Willie, the San Francisco Freedom Movement that I led was key to his being able to be elected to office. He was a free lawyer for us. Anytime I want to get anything done from Willie, I just put my foot up his butt. But Willie's a good brother. And so they had a relationship, and Willie's a good 30 years older than her. she was being schooled in politics by probably one of the smartest politicians in the country. So all I'm saying is there's more to Kamala Harris than you think. And by the way, she made a comment, and I'm going to end on this one. She said, I'm not calling for restructuring the country. I'm calling for improving conditions for Blacks and people of color and poor people and all of this. Now, the word restructuring, hardly a Democrat knows what that word means. Hardly a Black person knows what that word means. I'm not suggesting she's a revolutionary. She is not. She's a moderate Democrat. That is why she was picked by Biden. But the fact of the matter is, there's more to her than you know. And that's all I'm saying. So for Black folks, Negroes, as we call them, the ones that get on their knees and grow, who just know that every time you get a victory, it's a loss. One of the reasons why we're in such a weak position is we underestimate our strength. You understand? We underestimate our strength. And so that's what I would introduce on that. You need to know there's another side to Kamala Harris. You know what I mean? That's all you need to know.
Okay. All right. That's fine. So I'll go over to Professor Small now.
You got to unmute.
Yeah, let me.
Yes.
Try. Yeah.
I said my elder brother, over to Shaka, have shared some of this with me before, some months back before the election. I still put it in the category, there are possibilities of another side. Because we've had, since Reconstruction, multiple Africans in multiple strategic positions of governance in America. And I don't solely blame them, because we know the limitations when you get in the office. A lot of that falls on your people to make sure that you keep the promise you made when you asked for their vote. And we haven't done that very well. You know, I cut my teeth on Mansour's Burn Baby Burn back in 67, 68, when I'd come down from the mountains to the church in Oakland to the Afro-American Association meeting. I didn't bump it. I mean, I should have seen, you know, but when you're young and you're being stupid, like we all were in that early age. But we touched bases right about then. But I think Ms. Harris is an extraordinary thinker. I've been reading everything I can get my hands on after talking to her over some months ago, studying everything I can get my hands on. I think she's an extraordinary African woman. And I use the term African because my wife's mother is from the same province in India as her mom. So I've lived in that world for 50 years. And I know that population and the Dalit people and the other African peoples who are still fighting and struggling for survival in their Blackness in India. My wife came via Trinidad. So if we have anything in government this go around that's going to give the Black community in America some sort of edge, it's Ms. Harris. With the other elements that's in the cabinet and so forth, I think she's going to be the strategic organizing instrument for those other Black elements, if anybody can be. Because I had no problem with the district attorney. If you're district attorney, you're supposed to throw fools in jail or break the law. I really had no problem with that. But when she took the stance, people don't understand how powerful that was, to take the stance against the death penalty on behalf of a Black man who had killed a white cop at that time. That took courage beyond anything you can imagine. And then still hoping you can have a political future in California, which is literally a police state, especially at that time. You know? So I've got a lot of respect for her political skills. Her mentor, Brother Brown, you know, I lived in California for a long time, off and on, back and forth, still have family there. And Willie Brown was always our hero, because this was a Black man with the skills you had never seen in state government in that way, affecting the kind of change, mentoring multiple other Black people into the system. People tried to make it a negative relationship, but you got to know the political history of Willie Brown to understand the positive of that relationship. So I give her all my prayers, but then there's something that is on the population of Black people at large. Where is our agenda that we take to her? Okay. Where is our proposal that we take to her? I'm not saying she should know what all of us know, because she doesn't. She's doing some other stuff. Are we going to put together an agenda? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 things we would love to see, and prioritize the first 3 to 5 come out of this administration in the next 4 years. That's on us. And not only Ms. Harris, we've got 50-something persons in the Congress of African descent. I think it's 57, 58 now. We need to put some fire under their feet. They write laws, you know, and we're not doing it. We elect them, and then we go and sit down and say, okay, do your Black thing. They're not going to do that. We have to have a constancy of pressure through petitions and proposals and face-to-face whenever we can get it. And I love Sister Kujichagulia, because I always say the false notion of white supremacy. Well, girl, you don't give me a definition. You got to text me that thing so I can work it, right? And we can lay it out there. But I think we've got a chance for change like we've never had using government in the history of America. Now, how do we use it? There's somewhere between 45 and 60 million of us who's not in the political office. Now, how did that population of the 45 to 60 million, their representative, get their case before Kamala, get their case, like already me and some comrades have sent our case on Nigeria to the sister who's going to be in the UN. She sent the note back. She was very courteous. She answered. She said, I haven't been sworn in yet, but we wanted to be on the top of the desk when she hits that seat, that the Fulani and the Yoruba situation is crisis. We need some response that's positive. So we've got to do that kind of thing with the vice president and with other Black members of Congress. But I think she's a plus for Black people, and a big plus.
Okay. All right, that's great. And Sister Kujichagulia, what's your view on that point? Hold on.
Unmute.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Yeah.
That is so true. Both what Baba Shaka has said and Baba Smalls has said, that is so real. Of course, very simplistically, if Kamala Harris were to walk into a KKK rally, would she be accepted? No, she's Black. So is she Black spiritually, culturally, psychologically, emotionally, politically, physiologically? These are all things that we are all grappling with because of our dysfunction, thanks to racism. She is a plus for us. But the bigger plus, she's a plus for humanity in general. But the bigger plus is us. Again, she got there because of the people. The people have to be working on a plan, on a vision at all times, and be pushing those who are elected, because this is a republic, not a democracy. Those who are elected in the republic are responsible to us. We rarely hold them responsible. Every city councilman, assemblyman, mayor, governor, for everyone is beholden to us. What we do, often we put them in office and then we go on about our business and expect them to do everything. The reality is the people do have the power. We don't use our power. And I personally like to focus on issues more than individuals, because the issues will be here long after the individual has left office. Obama is gone. These issues are still here with us. If we focus on the principles as opposed to the people, and we focus on our responsibility of correcting the wrongs that have been created by this American government, then we have a better chance of winning if we all participate. We cannot look at an individual and think that one individual is going to solve all of the enormity of issues that we are facing. It is up to all of us. All of us have to be involved. All of us have to be engaged. And most of all of us have to be united on the same page and plan. We have to come together and see what is it that we want, because we all have different things that we're looking for. We vocalize them differently, we express them differently, but basically they're the same freedoms that we all are looking for in terms of humanity. We have to come together and organize to put our proposals before those who are elected. And then there are a lot of things that we can do without our elected representatives, that we can do on our own to make change in our families, our communities, our countries on the planet. We don't do that. So we need to step up our game and look at our responsibility and get organized so that we can hold our elected politicians responsible, but more so we have to hold ourselves responsible. What are we doing every day personally to bring change about? What are we doing personally every day to ensure unity, and that we are cooperating as one unit of human intelligence and genius to bring forth the spiritual realities of humanism that we as African people designed from the dawn of civilization? We need to reinstate that on this planet. No one has a better chance of doing this than those people who created those concepts in the first place, Africans. So we all have a major responsibility as individuals. And one of our biggest responsibilities is to unify as one group with one mission and aim to eliminate all of the insanity and dysfunction that we have come to adopt under all the dysfunction of racism. So we all have responsibility here. We can't just put it on a vice president, a president. We can't put it on any individual. We have to look at ourselves, because a lot of the things that have not been completed to this day are because of the apathy and inaction in our own communities, and that we take on ourselves. So we have to be more vigilant in what we do. We have to be clear about what we're doing. We have to get organized. We have to get into some organizations. There must be elders in that organization. I have no idea where I would be with not the love and instruction from my elders, Obata Shaka, Baba Smalls, John Henry Clark, Chancellor Williams, Dr. Ben. I mean, everything comes from the elders. And then we see this culture of youth looking at youth organizations and putting youth with youth, eliminating the elders, because then that eliminates our lineage and therefore our legacy and where we will be able to go. Those organizations must also have women in them. They must have balance, because that is ma'at. That's how we operate as African people. There must be youth, there must be age, there must be women, there must be men. And there is not one. It's one unity, but it's a group of people. We cannot look at Kamala Harris as one person to solve everything for us. That is insanity. Look in the mirror. Those are the people who are going to solve things.
Okay, thanks. Right, and quickly we go to Elder Pepperkai. Well, it's just, I mean, I'm thinking such a question that was really designed for our speakers in America because of the controversy that I was following during the election. So I think it's best if I go on to the next question, which will then bring in a lot more points. The next question is this one. Okay, the question of reparations came to the fore during the election. What are your views regarding reparation for ADOS and FBA? And I like especially to speak to those terms for us, ADOS and FBA, because when it comes to reparation, I know they're very much keyed in. Those organizations are keyed into it.
May I open up this segment?
Yeah.
And then
that's fine.
First of all,
yeah.
ADOS or FBA don't represent a large enough element of our population to be significant to anything. I wanted to get said first. ADOS has been fighting the issue of reparations. The context I find very confusing because of the definition they give of themselves and their attitude towards Africa as a whole and Pan-Africanism in general. So that is a very negative for them. But in COBRA and multiple other organizing fronts have been fighting for reparations for decades. The ADOS leadership was able to break out and use Twitter and Facebook more effectively. And so they get this big play over the last 3 years in their use of Facebook and Twitter. But they've been a constant progressive movement around reparations and a connection with the Congress through Dollins and others long before, decades before ADOS was born. And so they're owning some things they're not responsible for creating. Okay. And FBA, I spoke at the conference with in Atlanta a few months ago with Tariq Nasheed. I understand what they're trying to say, but they're going about it wrong. Because I'm clear, and what astounded me, they were using one of my lectures from 10 years ago, ADOS, to support their position. I had to call and ask to take my lecture down off of their Facebook page because Conrad Worrell called me and told me, God bless his soul, what are you doing supporting the statement? I didn't know what ADOS was, you know. So he said, go to Facebook. And there I am in my little black shirt. What I was trying to say is that if African Americans are going to really be a significant factor with their wealth and their size, we're the 4th largest African nation in the world population-wise. We are about the 12th or 13th wealthiest nation in the world economic-wise. But we have not defined ourselves as an ethnic nation. Now, when you say that, people get up in arms, but no one have a contradiction with the Yoruba being an ethnic nation, being Nigerian, and being African. And no one have a problem with the Ashanti being an ethnic nation, being Ghanaian, and being African. African Americans have a peculiar 3-year historical experience with one another under certain conditions in a certain environment. They have produced a culture of their own. People don't even respect our Creole. Everyone else has a Creole, but we don't have one. Everyone else got their remnants of the African history, but people just assume we don't have any. Our own peoples. And that's been part of the problem with the unification and the strength of the movement, because the most populated and wealthiest element of the Pan-African community off of the continent is rendered dysfunctional by its own people because they're not allowed to have an identity. And so what these people are doing are playing on that pathology. And I don't think either of those definitions I respect. I'm not a descendant of a slave.
Thank you.
I'm an African who was enslaved, you know. And I know Tariq was trying to give it a different beat, but simply respect the fact that we exist as a people. My brothers and sisters from Jamaica, they're a people, but they're an African people and a part of the African race. We don't deny their people, their ethno-peopleness. That's a part of what makes Pan-Africanism functional. But we're the only one that comes to the table of Pan-Africanism without an identity. And it makes the movement dysfunctional. And so I think we have to work on that. I don't think either of these, FBA certainly is not a movement. It has only been a conference and a discussion. ADOS have tried to form a movement, but I think once they had the conference last year and laid it out, the people who was intrigued by it realized this is a division. This is dividing Pan-Africanism. This is not uniting Pan-Africanism. And it's pretty much fizzled since that conference. So it's not representative of any large body. Many of the older Pan-African movements in the country are still the primary elements of our movement. You know, from the D12 to NCOBRA and multiple other parties in the country. We still need to struggle around, as Kujichagulia was just saying, how do we unite these various elements of our struggle, left, right, center, into at least a functional instrument, even if we can't get complete ideological unity, let's at least be functional around 10 points that must be addressed by the government of the United States in order for us to move forward. And we have to also be clear that we have to address the issue of the Caribbean and American imperialism, especially in Haiti, particularly, and in the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico. And then we have to address the issue of American imperialism in Africa, particularly in the Congo. But we know that America, Britain, and France back Boko Haram. They're putting the money, along with Saudi Arabia, behind that incursion and destabilization in Africa. We need to address what France is doing, because it's doing it with American support with the so-called Francophone states. Our agenda have to be our national issues addressed and our Pan-African issues addressed. And that's the entity, you know.
Yeah. Okay, I'd like to refer now to Dr. Obati Shaka. Same question.
Yeah, I want to start with an overall comment here. The strongest culture in the United States, which is the popular culture of the United States and the world, which is also the classical culture of the United States and the world, and which has developed an art form, which is the art form of this country, along with Native American culture and art form. Europeans have none, and that's African American culture. I call it New African culture. It is not that our culture is weak, it's that it hasn't been articulated. And part of the problem is many of our scholars have been, conscious scholars, have put all their time on Africa and practically no time on looking at the culture of Africans in America. Now, some have, and some unintentionally. Malcolm would say, our brother El Haj Malik El Shabazz, that we lost our culture in slavery. But then, after he met with the Ghanaian Minister of Culture in Ghana, he made the most perceptive statement he ever made about African American culture. And he said that he foresaw a time where the African in America would do what our creative artists have done and go inside their soul and create a new economic system, a new political system, a new social system. And then he said, provided that we have a sense of power. The fact is, we've been doing that all along. Our scholars have not articulated what we're doing, because here's the fact. African and African American culture is a lived culture. It is not an abstract intellectual culture. And we too often intellectualize culture the same way white people do. And so as a result, we don't run around saying that, for example, our view of spirituality is some abstract thing. In fact, we don't even call it spirituality. We say you got religion. That means you got the spirit. Spirit is at the foundation of all African so-called religions. There's no word for religion in any African language and no word for spirituality. Those are intellectual concepts. The practice is what it is. And so why is it that blacks were such a force in this last election? The same reason that Garvey was such a force. The same reason that the Black Freedom Movement was such a force. Because when blacks get together, and no group gets together all the time, it is hard to get us together. Until recently, we got together 97%. Now it's 87%. It follows our marriage rate. 97% of blacks have married blacks from 1865 to 1968. And it is less than that now, but it is 87%, 93% sisters, 86% brothers. Understand? Marry black. Jews, 50% marry whites. You know, every other group in here, Latinos, 30% marry outside of Latinos. They're confused because the basis of nationalism is always social. It's your family. Kujichagulia is a former student of mine, by the way. I don't take any credit for her. She followed her own path, and she's a revolutionary, and that's what I like most. She's a revolutionary. And one of the things I like about Kujichagulia most of all is that she's into Africa. She's in the All African People's Revolutionary Party. You know what I mean? But at the same time, she's into African American or New African. I prefer to call it New African culture. She plays the trumpet. She's a poet. She's a soul sister. And the point is, what is the point of African culture if you're not looking at how it applies to your own? And that's true in the Caribbean as well. Too many conscious Africans from the Caribbean are all into Africa, but don't really articulate their own African Caribbean culture, except theirs is clear because nobody's telling them they don't have one. Our scholars tell us we don't have a culture. Give me a break. And how can you go arguing for reparations when you're saying you're not human? Because if you don't have a culture, you're not human. So give me a break. My greatest passion is African American culture. I love African culture.
Oh my God.
You hear me? But I always say it's a poor frog that don't praise its own pond. And my favorite pond is muddy waters. Literally, the muddy waters of African culture, but muddy waters. Really? When the Beatles came to the United States and they were asked, why did you come here? They said they came to see a monument. And they said, what was that monument? They said, muddy waters.
That's right.
These white boys said, muddy what? What is that? You hear me? And James is smiling because he comes from South Carolina. James Smalls and I bond like twins for a lot of reasons. But first of all, the brother's humble, he's wise, he loves Black people. And his wisdom ain't all book knowledge. His wisdom comes out of his culture. He reads, he knows his culture, but it comes out of some deep wisdom. It comes out of South Carolina. He talked about the Bible Belt of South Carolina. That is about as African as you get. You hear me? Only thing about it as African as that is Haiti. You hear me? So quit saying we're weak. Now, James, Professor Smalls is right. We're not conscious that we're a nation. We're a nation unconsciously. We need to be conscious of what it is that ties us together. So the reason that 87% of Blacks could throw their muscle behind a Biden is the same reason that 97% of Blacks do their muscle behind the Montgomery bus boycott. It is the same reason that most Blacks in the South supported the Honorable Marcus Garvey when to just be Black got you lynched. You hear me? To support Garvey, you hear me? Why? Race consciousness, baby. The first defining principle of this culture. We're the most race conscious people on the planet because we had to be, not because we're superior. We just face racism, but without being racist, except towards each other sometimes. That's our problem. And it ain't racism, but it's internal self-hatred. But most of us don't have that. That's been exaggerated, but we do have that. And we have to overcome that. So I'm saying that to then get into the reparations thing. We have a culture. The culture is the basis for any demands we make. And there are some key demands that we need to be making on this administration. The other thing I want to say is this. The most primary struggle is not a ballot box. It's in the streets. I come out of the streets. I never went into electoral politics, not because I didn't see its value, but I saw other people that had specialized in that. And I also saw that whatever we got into Congress or the presidency, whatever, came from the streets. Voting rights came from the streets. Desegregation came from the streets. Whatever happens that's going to be changed comes from the streets. And by the way, Black Lives Matter has been trying to get a meeting with Biden. They have been trying to put their demands on the table. Everybody else has met with them. NAACP has met with them. Urban League has met with them. The Black establishment has met with them. The Black establishment is the control arm of Blacks in this country. The grassroots group that has put motion in the ocean has had the most difficulty in getting a meeting, but they have put their demands out there in a general way, and more need to be added. And one demand has been, the police, defund the police. Obama comes out and opposes that. And I know that a lot of Black people support him. I said, shut up. Keep your mouth shut. because he's arguing that this hurt black elected officials. The fact is, who in political office has done anything about police violence against black people? It's a constructive demand that take a big, huge part of the budget. In Oakland, 60% of the budget goes to the darn police who kill you. And they got the nerve to call me and other black people asking us to give money to the police. I feel like telling these, I can't say this on TV, what I really say, you know what I mean? I just hang the phone up. But the fact of the matter is, you are paying a lynching department who doesn't even live in your community, that'll shoot you before they talk to you, you know what I mean? So that's a demand. But the other demand they put forward, and I think other demands fall underneath this one. And I already anticipated this demand. I know some people in Black Lives Matter, but they didn't tell me. I knew where the thinking was going, because they pulled out of our best political pages of the 60s and earlier, and they have said that the defense budget needs to be cut. And all demands for any kind of change from this administration or any administration has got to have dollars to it. And where's most of the dollars? It's over $700 billion in the defense budget. That was a 2-year budget that Obama had to save the economy. He only saved the rich. So whatever we demand, where, you know, if there's a question of where the money's coming from, that's part of where it comes from. One of the things we need is a demand is, and our economists or the political people need to analyze exactly what this is. What's the state of homelessness in America? How many people are homeless? A large number of Black and people of color and some whites, very few Asians from what I can see. But the point is, large number of people are homeless. Why? Number one, people are in poverty. Some people are homeless, have jobs, and they can't even afford to pay rent with the jobs. But the fact is, the government has gone out of low income housing. They say low and moderate, you should eliminate moderate, low. I built King Garvey, which is a 230 unit cooperative housing unit when I was 25 years old out of HUD money. And then I put our people in there and we turned it into a cooperative. We let the government pay for it and then we took it over. The point is, we need to be demanding that trillions of dollars go into low income housing. And that should be a part of a rebuild America plan, this infrastructure plan that they can probably get the Republicans to agree to. We could have a whole bunch of demands that go into that. Now just to briefly deal with ADOS. My show, the Dr. Shaka show, we did a show on ADOS. We brought in some experts. And so I found out a few things about ADOS. First of all, I agree with Professor Small's point. How are you going to be around here calling yourself American descendants of slaves? That means you're rejecting your African.
That's right.
But here's the first thing about ADOS that I discovered. When ADOS was first formed, it had nothing to do with reparations. It was anti-immigrant, and it was anti-Black immigrant, and it still is. And it has created this divide in the Black community around, were you born in America and then they call you a fundamental African? Or were you born in the Caribbean? Or were you born in Africa? How stupid can you get? I mean, Denmark Vesey, are you going to say you're going to reject the Denmark Vesey rebellion because he was on a slave ship that stopped in Haiti, came to America, had won him his freedom based on this lottery, and then engaged in a revolution? The best planned in the United States that included Africans straight out of Africa, Africans like him who had been from other places, the Caribbean, and then Africans who were second generation Africans. Some coming from the Bible or Gulajak coming out of voodoo. You understand? Now, what you're going to say? That some are fundamental and some aren't? No, you're fundamentally ignorant because you don't know your own history. African people are global. You hear me? Global. So that notion, so that they in the beginning are anti-immigrant. They are working with an immigrant group that is right-wing, and they're funded by them. And that is the woman that's in charge of ADOS. That's where she comes from. And they're very smart propaganda tool that's got them over. They're very good with media.
Yeah.
That's that group. They have framed issues very well. So I make a distinction between them and the mass followers of ADOS. There are many mass followers of ADOS who are confused. They don't know any better. You know what I mean? So they're running around here threatening anybody that takes a position that's opposed to ADOS, but that's because that's the group that they've latched onto. So basically, ADOS is something that is not really operating, the leadership of which is not operating in the best interest of Black people. Now, at the point that they discover reparations, then that's when they took off. Because at that point, they now have an issue that's appealing to Black people. But it's anti-Black immigrant. They are not anti-white immigrants. You hear me? They are not anti anybody else other than us. And of course, probably Latinos. So and here's the other thing they have, and this is a real trick. They have put forward demands on reparations only on the Democratic Party. They have put no demands forward on the Republicans. So for the whole time of Trump, they made no demands. And this is what they tell their followers. If the Democrats do not give you reparations, don't vote. Huh? So that's pro-Trump.
That's right.
Black people vote Democratic. They don't say vote Trump. They say don't vote. So it's a scam. So even quit asking questions on ADOS or expose them. You hear me? But do not treat them like they've got any kind of agenda. But I understand why you ask it. People in the Caribbean are asking, well, why aren't you following ADOS? Brother Smalls is right. Cobra has been out there forever. And by the way, Conrad Worrell, who was chair in Buff, I was vice chair, brothers passing on, good brother, he made a very important point. He said, ADOS is not a movement. He said, ADOS is a creation of the internet. And the only movement they've had is when they've had a few conferences, and that's it. And from what Professor Smalls says, people got exposed when they got into those conferences and realized that at the very least, it was divisive. Give me my paycheck. That's their whole notion. I want my paycheck. They ain't involved in nothing. And by the way, some members of ADOS put out a thing using the F word on Doc Ben. They did a whole speech on him called F Doc Ben. You hear me? Huh? Do you hear me?
They're fundamentally anti-Pan-Africanism. They're clearly anti-Africanism.
Yeah.
You know, and they're vocally on that issue. So
yeah, bankrupt.
Right.
Bankrupt.
So I decided to bring in Sister
Do your homework.
Kujichagulia now.
Well, this is the power of racism, where people are very aware of these other organizations. And for me, the only one I know is Cobra. The only one I know of is Cobra. And the only one people should be looking at is Cobra. So Dr. Imara Obadeli, Hannibal Afrique, we have seen Cobra around for decades. I was a member of the West Coast Planning Committee of Cobra in the 80s and the 90s. Then my daughter took over the female chairmanship of Cobra, and she is now the West Coast director of Cobra with Jahahara, who is the male, because in Cobra there must be a male and female. So my daughter is the female. So if you're looking at reparations, you must be looking towards and at Cobra. Do your research in reference to Cobra. Stop looking at these newcomers on the block. That's nice, they're there, but go to the root. Always go to the roots, because the root holds the truth. Go to Cobra if you're looking for reparations. In terms of this concept of African identity, how dysfunctional is it that we have Caucasians, people who originate from the Caucasus mountain range of Russia, calling themselves African? We have documents in the United States where Caucasians can check a box and say, I am white of African descent. Caucasians have no problem of any ethnic group calling themselves African, not Nigerian, not Ugandan, the whole entire continent. They are comfortable. But Africans, Blacks around the world, are having issues calling themselves African. That is the epitome of our dysfunction. We suffer from what I call lard. And as you know, too much lard will kill you. Lard, L-A-R-D. We listen to whatever white psychopathy tells us. We accept it. We don't do research. We don't analyze. We just accept it. We repeat it. We repeat it to other people. Oh, ADOS this and whatever. And then we defend it. And we defend it with our lives. We listen, accept, repeat, defend. We don't listen, analyze, think, and evaluate. Better late than never. We have got to get rid of the lard. We have a revolution that we have to put in a full swing. And that is a revolution of the mind. We are so confused. We are so dysfunctional. We are so disunited because we are confused. And this confusion is evident in the curriculum from the minute you were born, from the womb to the tomb. This dysfunction is programmed into all human beings. So reparations must include money is one thing, but what good is money if we're going to turn it over to every Gucci Poochie fashion designer and insane tennis shoe company we can find? We have to know what to do with the money. If we get money and our minds are not revolutionized, what good is the money? And what good is money if we do not have land? We need to be talking about land, and we need to be talking about a revolutionized mind. Because once we have a revolutionized mind, you can give us 1 penny. That 1 penny, we're going to turn it into $1 billion for our people. Without a revolutionized mind, we can have $1 billion and we will squander it and be left with a penny, and not one of those dollars went to our people. We have got to start changing people's minds. And that is going to happen in dealing with the truth. The reality of the truth has never been told. Most Americans don't know American history, European history, African history. Most people have no concept of history. There is only one group of people on the planet, Black folks, Africans, Blacks, who can say they are indigenous to every continent except Antarctica. We are the only people indigenous to every continent except Antarctica. The human race evolved from us, through us, with us 3.5 million years ago. If anybody is African, it is us. So this dysfunction that has occurred from miseducation, we have got to attack that. That's why writing books, reading books is crucial. Please keep writing books. We have to keep reading books. We have to do reference, cross-reference. Children today don't even know how to cross-reference. They go straight to Google and they look up something. Well,
exactly.
Look up the word Black, Google it, and scroll to the bottom. 2021, what does it say? Black, criminal, ignorant, ugly, liable for punishment. 2021, Google the word dark, same thing. Google the word white, and we see the full circle of white psychopathy. We have got to change this miseducation. And the only way to do that is with the truth. People who have the truth need to be injecting it into every aspect of society. Economics, education, entertainment. And that's what I love about African Americans, the entertainment industry, especially the African American classical jazz musicians who were the revolutionary force of freedom in this country. That's a whole nother story. But we have got to inject truth, because the reason we are in so much dysfunction is that white psychopathy has put so many lies on the planet. And whatever is repeated is perfected. Whatever you repeat, you perfect. And we have all become perfectly dysfunctional with our lies. We've got to get the truth out. What good is anything if every child matriculates through school learning the same racist white psychopathy? At this moment, children are learning the same white psychopathy. We have got to kill that white psychopathy, and the only way to kill it is with the truth, the reality. The entire miseducation system has got to be changed. All the lies that it holds have to be eliminated so that people can grow up with the truth. And I this may be ahead of the conversation, but the attempted coup d'etat we saw at the Capitol is based on these lies. This country was based on the lie of white psychopathy. Every Caucasian in this country has been programmed since 1495 to believe that they are supreme. Year after year, Caucasians are told this. The miseducation system promotes this. All others feel that they are minor, have minor status as minorities, and people act accordingly. And by the time you graduate from school, and especially if you've got a PhD, you have learned that you have mastered white psychopathy. So this goes beyond a dollar amount. We have got to start thinking of the reality that exists here. All the money in the world can disappear and there will still be civilizations and society. It existed before there was capitalism and before there was money. We are talking about how are people going to live and interact with each other in a society. And a lot of it is going to be based on how we think, how we analyze, how we critically analyze our thoughts and look at each other and work together. If we do not get the truth out, the truth about the myth of white supremacy, the truth out about the reality that only Africans are indigenous to Africa and Blacks are indigenous to the whole planet, then we are missing a big part of this discussion. Reparations is not a financial or monetary concept. Yes, money is something that people need. Capitalism is something that we have to eliminate, but economics is how societies are managed and controlled. Capitalism is not the only economy that there is. There was economies on this planet long before capitalism. We have to stop thinking that money is the end all be all. The mind, the spirit and the mind is the end all be all. And once we get that aligned and straightened out, everything else is going to be like the domino effect. We need to start looking at the dysfunction that we have accumulated from centuries of white psychopathy. We've got to focus on that. And any package of reparations that does not acknowledge land, talk about land, because you can't build a house, have food, grow anything unless you have land, and think about the dysfunction that comes from the miseducation of white psychopathy, that has got to be eliminated. There must be a land base that we look at, that we claim, that we control, not through neo-colonialism, but that we control. And if we're not looking at land, if we're not looking at our mentality, our psychology, if we're not looking at N'Cobra, we're looking in the wrong place. The reparations discussion must be centered on land. It must be centered on eliminating all the miseducation of white psychopathy, and it must be centered on N'Cobra. Look at what N'Cobra's doing. Follow N'Cobra, because N'Cobra has put it together. There's no need to reinvent the wheel. And follow the revolutionaries. The people that we get a lot of that we pay attention to are the people that this nation and, you know, America does not really want us to know about. So, of course, people know more about ADOS than they know about Baba Oba Shaka or any of us, because we are not promoting that insanity. So the insanity is always promoted. And then people are now left to discuss the insanity. I forget the word Oba said, the craziness of the internet and all of that. I love that word he said earlier. But we have got to start looking at people who we know have a history, a track record. We're talking about decades of doing the correct thing in terms of African people and humanity. And N'Cobra has that track record. There's no need to reinvent the wheel. Get on board with N'Cobra. Put land in that discussion. You have to grow food somewhere. It grows on land. Houses are built out of materials that grow on land. Land has got to be part of that discussion. And the elimination of white psychopathy and racist miseducation. Crucial point. Why do anything as an adult if every baby is learning the same dysfunction? Got to kill that miseducation.
Okay, that's great. So finally, Elder Pepperkai, so what's your view on, say, reparation as a whole?
I'll be very brief because my sister has really put it into perspective. First, on the question of ADOS, we can say dust to dust, ashes to ashes, and we finish with them. But on the question of reparation, my sister's got it to a T. Reparation is not about money. It's about self-repair. Repair everything we can think of to reinstitute ourselves as a people, or education institution, or political institution, or financial institution. Everything we can think of is about us reinstating our African self. So I don't have to add too much to what our sister have just said.
Okay, that's great. So we can move on to the other point, and that is, let me just take it up there. Okay, the other point is, as we know, on the 6th of January, extraordinary event took place. So what's your overall view on the invasion of the Capitol, that's Washington, D.C., on the 6th of January? What do you think was really behind it, and what was really happening there? Let's start with Brother T. Shaka.
Yeah, this is extremely important. Some have said that this is the only time that the Capitol has been invaded since the War of 1812, when the British burned down the White House. It's a historically important event, but I think what we need to understand is what's behind it, and we can make some projections on where it's going. As a number of people have said, including Sister Kujichagulia, is this country was founded on the false notion of white supremacy, though the reality of white violence, the reality that whites would genocide Native Americans, 90% of them, enslave Africans, and steal half of Mexico. Theft. And so that's the founding of this country. And as a result of that, whites have felt entitlement. They feel this is their place. They should own it totally. Everyone else should just submit to it. You're temporary visitors. And whenever we decide to lynch you, do whatever we want, whether it's physical, mental, psychological, we'll just do it. So here's the thing. Again, we underestimate our power. By the way, I've been a warrior now 61 years, never lost a battle. And I always say, don't enter a fight unless you can win it. Sometimes we've lost because we fought losing battles. But the smartest people in the 50s and 60s were in the South. They fought a battle, and it was against Southern-style apartheid. It was against the denial of the right to vote and the whole system of legal apartheid or segregation. That had been installed with the Hayes-Tilden Compromise. It had occurred earlier in the close election between Hayes and Tilden. The decision was that Hayes could be president as long as the federal troops were withdrawn, and then allow the South to go back to running things on their own. Now, the truth is the Klan had basically taken back most of those states. Only 3 states had any kind of federal intervention or military intervention in 1876, and only 17,000 federal troops were in the South during the whole period of Reconstruction, and it's 10 states that refused to follow the 14th Amendment that ends slavery. You understand? So blacks were left to fend for themselves, and you had black militias. But the Klan was riding high and strong. And it wasn't just the Klan, but a bunch of right-wing groups. They were murdering, slaughtering. Blacks fought back. But the fact is the numbers were in their favor, and the North never gave blacks the support that they deserved. Now, this first phase that whites like to call white supremacy is what I call the high tide of white history. The British have been ruling the world for more than 200 years. White people in the United States were coming to supreme power, which would occur in World War I when they take the place of Britain. Britain becomes a debtor nation. They owe debt to America. Now America's a debtor nation. They owe debt to China. China's going to supplant America in less than 20 years as the global power. And once Africa gets its stuff together, it's Asia today, it's Africa tomorrow. You hear me?
That's right.
That's where that baby's going. And China better be careful in its rise with how it treats Africa, because they're doing some stuff right now that ain't too cool, including the president of China making fun of African history. That's that old arrogance that when you get to power, you know, you start acting white. The time in China where they said no dogs, or another term they use for Chinese allowed. I won't use it here. You know. So the first thing is when the Klan and everything rode, they rode at a high tide. They had a high tide going for them. And Trump tried to draw on this high tide when he tried to win the second time, steal the election. And the Republicans have been doing it. They've done gerrymandering, which was, it wasn't just that whites came back into power after the Civil War through violence. They came back through gerrymandering. They came back through ballot boxes. So they would actually eliminate polls. Same thing Trump did. You understand? I predicted, I did a show on Dr. Shaka's show called Lessons from Post-Reconstruction for Voting Trump Out of the White House into the Jailhouse. And I pretty well predicted how this thing would go. And I pointed out that all the trickery he's using now is not going to work. Why? It's now our high tide. This is the high tide that begins with African and Asian independence. Africa's still in trouble, but it is not under the same colonial mandate it was under before. And so everything they do now, they cannot go back to the day where you can just silence the black vote or silence the black movement. So there was the low tide, and we resisted. The high tide begins in 1955 with the Montgomery bus boycott, going through the end of the 60s. Blacks score one of the most important victories against white power in this country. What they do is they defeat the initiative of post-Reconstruction to take us out of the ballot, to segregate us, and to do anything they want to us. It was the first, it wasn't the first, but it was one of the major victories. One of the greatest victories along with that was the Seminole African Wars. Those were the only wars that Native Americans won. They won battles before. Battle of Little Bighorn, you know what I mean? Where, you know, the great leader, Sitting Bull, was both a warrior and a priest, and through a dream prophesied the battle of Little Bighorn. And they kicked Custer's behind. In the movement, we would always say, we don't want to be Custer. You know what I mean? Custer them. In other words, we're going to do what, you know, Sitting Bull did. So that was a victory. But the point is, this is the key point. What happened on the 6th of January is an outgrowth of the new right wing. And the new right wing is the right wing that has got two wings, one of which is the mainstream wing. That's the wing that's in the political parties, both parties, Democratic and Republican, but especially the Republican Party. It is the think tanks and the Heritage think tank. Right now, I've done a thing on a show on this, analysis on my show, but the biggest think tank that's had an influence on the Trump administration has been the Heritage think tank. They have put a huge number of their members, all right wing, into the Trump administration, and they've basically trashed every department that they've headed up, because their only requirement for a person to serve in a cabinet position or a major position was that they be into white superiority. They did not need to know anything about that agency because they were in to do it in. DeVos, who was Secretary of Education, Betsy DeVos, who's one of the richest people in this country, she is a major financer of the Heritage Foundation and a person who's into privatizing public schools. So there is that wing. And then there is the armed wing. The armed wing and the mainstream wing have a different attitude now. Again, we underestimate our own power. because this is based on Black power. They recognize, and the new right wing, and this is the group that you see in the Capitol, both in the House and the Senate, and among the mob, both, because they both have the same idea. This is the group that comes into being in the 70s and the 80s. And what distinguishes them from the old right wing, the old Ku Klux Klan, the old politicians who are on the ascendancy? They recognize something that we don't give ourselves enough credit for. Some of us do. Some of us know our part. I want to say this about Black people. Our greatest weakness is we don't understand our strengths.
That's right.
Our greatest strength is our culture, because our culture drives everything else. As Amilcar Cabral said, liberation's an act of culture, and it's often the highest expression of culture. Malcolm X, we say, is the sharpest political mind produced in the United States, because why? He was at the heart and soul of a resistance movement, and it rose him higher and higher. You hear me? So the thing is, what distinguishes this group that occupied the Capitol on the 6th of January from the previous Ku Klux Klan is this. They recognized they were defeated in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. They recognized this, and it is called, they have a mentality, if you study them. I study my enemy. You hear me? I study them. That's why I ain't lost no battles, baby. I know how they work. I tried to ambush the Klan in Canton, Mississippi. These suckers wouldn't come. I would have killed more Klansmen than any Black people in the history of the United States. I'm ex-Marine. I'm an expert marksman. I'm a martial artist. Damn it. You're going to come. I'm going into Canton, Mississippi, and these suckers here are shooting at our Freedom House. I was National Chair Corps. I led the Black National Swinging Corps. I was in charge. I said, listen, we're laying an ambush on these suckers. They didn't come. They're too damn cowardly to come. I ended up in jail in Jackson and faked my way out with my gun and my bullets. But the key point is, what's the difference between the Klan before and the Klan in the 60s? They have a mentality of dispossession. You need to understand what drove those people on the 6th of January is they know they have been dispossessed of sole and exclusive power of America. Do not discount what you achieved, because what you achieved was you got political space to maneuver that they did not want you to have a single handle on. So what you have is the Proud Boys, the Boogaloo Boys, the 3%ers, all of the rest of these, the Oath Keepers. Many of them are the product of this mentality. The Ku Klux Klan that is operating now operates different from how they operated in the high tide. They are now operating as a people who feel dispossessed. And so their strategy has now been to take off the sheets and put on suits and run for Congress. You hear me? And run for state houses, you know, assemblies and whatnot, and to put their program into slogans, you know, like welfare cheaters. You know, when Ronald Reagan ran for president, where did he announce his candidacy? Philadelphia, Mississippi, where the 3 core civil rights workers were murdered. You hear me? And so what you see is there's a new Klan. And so the people that gathered, who Trump gathered, Trump has become like the mouthpiece for these groups. Many of these groups, some of them are now disaffected with him because they didn't get a pardon, but many of them used him. But he also spoke to a broader group, because this right wing is not only paramilitary, but it is also whites at large, because Trump was a white president, and 58% of whites who voted for Trump. And more white women voted for Trump the second time than the first time. And he had done more damage to them and everybody else before white, because white-itis comes first. The idea of whites being supreme comes first.
That's right.
So the thing is, you know, the people that gathered on January the 6th, the alleged purpose was for the purpose of trying to overturn the election. Notice that the election outcomes they wanted to overturn were all in Black areas in which Blacks had overwhelmingly voted for Biden and shifted the election. Places like Georgia, places like Pennsylvania. And then notice that in places like Arizona, the Latinos and Native Americans, the Navajos voted 99% for Biden. Native Americans got more sense than anybody else, 99%. And the Latinos had already got rid of Sheriff Arroyo, who had been parading Mexicans through Arizona, chained. And so there was networks of people of color. And by the way, the Latino vote was 20 million. The Black vote was 19 million. And the Latino vote doubled from whatever it was before. It doubled, even though it went from 70% to 66% for Biden, because Trump was able to pull off a little bit of the Latino vote. There were many millions more, almost double what the Latino vote had done before. So the other reason that whites feel dispossessed is immigration. And the immigration reform of 1965, we didn't call for it, but it was the ethos of the Black freedom movement that put Johnson and other people in the position of not being able to defend in a world of color where Africa and Asia is rising, prohibiting immigration from Asia. And the reality is Asian and Latinos get in, especially Mexicans. We don't. And that should be the demand that we lay on this country also, is increase the immigration pool of Africans into this country. We up our own immigration into this country, instead of being fooled by all this data they're coming up with is all the people who thrive are Black immigrants from the Caribbean or Africa. All immigrants thrive over their own ethnic group in the first generation. They all do, because they come in from countries that are poor and they see the opportunity. They'll work for less or they'll seize every opportunity. But second generation, they perform just like the others in their group. If they're from Africa, they become African American. They perform like us, and we still perform high. But so that's a key point. They know now Trump's election in 2016 coincided with the recognition that immigration was now going to sweep white people. And we now know by 2044, the majority of people in this country will be Black, brown, red, and yellow. White numerical control will be broken. And this is the key thing I want to make here. Again, don't underestimate your power. Of all these groups, which one has the greatest power when it comes to both political motion in the ocean and culture? It's the African American group. Proof of the pie is in the pudding. Proof of the pie is in the pudding that this culture of African Americans is a popular choice of Asian youth, Latino youth, and of course, Blacks, and a sizable number of white youth. And guess who produces change in the country? It's the youth. Guess when there's a revolution, who makes the revolution? It's the youth. And so here's the key point about this demographic shift. We are the culture of popular choice, but we have a homogenous culture. We need to become conscious of it. And as Sister Kujichagulia makes a point of, we need to embrace our Africanness. The weakest part of our culture is, while we'll embrace Blackness, we often, too many of us, don't want to embrace Africa, and that's because of systematic brainwashing of slavery. Right. That can be a hard one to get over, too. But the key point is, that is the area that we need to get over. And the Caribbean needs to do the same thing. Because Blacks in the Caribbean, what do they say? I ain't no African, I'm a Jamaican. I'm a Bajan. I'm a this, I'm a that. You know what I mean? Huh? Yeah. You're a Jamaican African. You're a Bajan African. You know what I mean? And if you want to stay there in Jamaica, you should. And throw out those corrupt suckers in Jamaica. By the way, my wife is from Barbados. It's one of the best run nations on the planet. They've only had one dishonest government. They just threw that government out. And in that country, people are doing well. In fact, they have one of the 2 highest longevity rates in the world. Highly educated people, a good medical system. but they have leaders that care about their people. So January the 6th, people came thinking that Trump had tried everything. He had gone to court to try and overturn this. Everybody knew it wouldn't work. He had tried to pressure people who were in charge of elections in different states, including Georgia. It was even recorded. That didn't work. He had called for 10,000 National Guard to be brought in to Washington, D.C. Now, it's not clear that he was calling for it to do what you might think, but he did call for that. The point is, his last resort was to draw on his white base to go down there and to do everything they could to intimidate the Congress. That had no chance of succeeding. To call this a coup is incorrect. An attempted coup. You don't get no attempted coup with bats. You don't get no attempted coup, coup with a lynching post. By the way, that lynching post was for Pence and probably Nancy Pelosi. That comes out of the Turner Diaries. One of the key things that shapes the new right wing are the Turner Diaries, written by a guy named Pierce that comes out in 1978, that basically argues a multicultural government has taken over the country. It's oppressing white people. A multicultural police has taken over, and the response has been, should be, for armed militias, lone militias, to rise up. Timothy McVeigh, when he blew up the federal building, was taking a chapter out of the Turner Diaries. You understand? And the Turner Diaries has really updated the new right wing in its thinking, because when the founders of the New Klan and others came along, they said, how could black people and inferior people defeat us? So they couldn't accept the fact that we had outmaneuvered them. So they came up with what the Turner Diaries said. Pierce, who's the author, that the Jews were behind it. The Jews were, because blacks don't have enough brains. So this new right wing is operating on that. So those that went into the Capitol, which, by the way, with no police there, no federal, no FBI there, the FBI did not give out any real alerts or anything else, because the military and the police have blinded themselves to what they call white supremacy groups. They have focused on Islamic terrorism and the rest. And by the way, one of the biggest dangers we need to look at that's coming out of this is this anti-terrorism stuff that they're talking about doing, because they're not defining this as an anti-white supremacist set of laws that need to be carried out. Those laws will be used against us. So we have to be very careful and put pressure on the fact that they need to define this as white supremacists. Let them use that term. I agree with Kujichagulia, don't use it. But for them, identify them as the threat, because they are the threat. So basically, I don't see this as a coup. What I see this as a major, different groupings in there had different views. The mass of people saw them coming out because Trump, their daddy, told them to come out, and they're going to support him. And some of them were dumb enough to think he'd pardon them if anything happened. But within it, the hardcore militia had an agenda. Some of them you saw some of them in there, and they had plastic bans. That was to arrest people. They got Pence out 1 minute before they got in to get him. And that was to hang him. Now, whether they were going to do it or not, it would depend on who got him. And by the way, the guy that was caught on camera with the plastic that you use for handcuffs, he's Air Force Academy graduate, military. So you had police in there, you had some military in there, you had firefighters in there, and a couple of Negroes in there.
Yep.
Not very many, 1 or 2 or 3. Because that was a white gathering. White women and men, mostly men. And it was working class white men as well as others. You could clearly see working class. The other thing I want to say about this is you better understand something else. This isn't just about racism. This is also about the ruling class. The people that run this country have discarded their own people. Before, it was everybody came on our back and they could prosper. But since deindustrialization, since neoliberalism, which is privatizing everything, whites have been thrown into the garbage can. The average white working class male has lost 4 years of life expectancy in the last 5 years. So this is also an economic protest. And you saw the anger towards the government. But within those who will direct this, their objectives, this is the other thing, I'll end with this. What's new about the new right wing is the old right wing, their view was, of course, they run the whole country. But now, since they have all these other groups they have to deal with, they have conceded something. They are prepared to live in of their own. Now, you want to talk about dispossession, you go from running the whole thing to where you're satisfied with having one or two. And I'd be all for it. Give them the poorest states. Let them have it. Or take the government and fry black, brown, red, and yellow people, and that would be their ultimate objective. This was not a coup because coups require power. Coups require guns. Coups don't take place in an advanced capitalist country unless sections of the people that run the country support it. And one thing these white boys who are running the country right now is not supporting is taking away their goodies, which is the nation state, which is the basis for their wealth. They're not. So right now, the head of the House, of the Senate, McConnell, is being pressured by big business to indict Trump. They want him indicted. And the reason is they backed him once he got into office. He got in without any corporate support. None, except for a few. Corporations did not get him in. He had no money when he got elected in 2016. They benefited from it. But now he's gone too far. The donor class has said, dump him. So we'll see what happens to Trump. But that's the overall thing. But what I would say is that movement ain't the most important thing. It's the movement we have on the ground. I really want to say this about dispossession. The election of Barack Obama led them to have a real sense of dispossession because you got a black man occupying what is considered to be the most powerful position in the world. It's not. Corporations run the place. But as far as they're concerned, that was like being castrated, seeing him every day in the White House. So that has been like a major bone of contention. But the other thing is, don't underestimate this. Right now, the motion that blacks have put forward is stronger than the motion that whites have gone, and it has white support. And the question is, what do we do to build on that? What do we do to advise people who are in Black Lives Matter and the other? And Jay Smalls is right. It wasn't just Black Lives Matter. In fact, it wasn't any of those groups when it kicked off. It was just angry black folks. The most organized groups could give it definition. And so the question is, what input do activists have, not just in Black Lives Matter, into their motion, into what those demands should be, not only in the White House and in, you know, the legislative assemblies, but in the streets? What are those? What kind of organizing we need to do? And I'm proud of this group because they play from the best of the black playbook, black political playbook. So yeah, that's it.
Okay, it's a very comprehensive answer. So our next, Professor Small, so what's your take on it? Because I've got, and after this, I've got one more question still.
I'd have to be sent to the insane asylum to try to follow that with any kind of faith. I think laid it out as comprehensively. He covered all bases. That was one of the most comprehensive descriptions, which I fully agree with, I've ever heard. So I support what has already been said.
Okay, that's great. So again, Sister Kujichagulia, anything to add?
Same thing. And I want to add to what Oba said, because we really have to be careful and start looking at this anti-terrorism information and act that's coming out, because the reality is America, racism likes to pretend that the enemy is black, brown, Muslim, communist, socialist, but America's enemy is Caucasian, capitalist, Christians. The Capitol was full of Christian, Caucasian capitalists. That's the enemy. But the Terrorist Act, I'm sure, is not going to identify any of those groups. They're not going to be going after white Christians, Caucasians or white capitalists. No, they're going to be looking again at what? Communists, socialists, Muslims, Black. That's not the problem. But that's the confusion that racism gives us. And too many of us listen, accept, repeat, and defend it. So we really have to be prepared to analyze what's going on, to stop it as much as we can. And most of all, we have got to get organized. Please, we've got to get organized, because those people, while we're on this discussion, they're planning. That you think they just left the Capitol and they said, okay, we're done now? No, they are planning. They are always planning. And we take it for granted simply because we don't see them in the media. They have been here since 1865, and America has done nothing except enable and support and protect them since 1865. What's happening to them now? We have to be vigilant with this anti-terrorism act and make sure that they address the real terrorists in this country. Caucasian Christian capitalists, Timothy McVeigh, Terry Nichols, the Dravidian group, and we can go on and on. They're all Christian Caucasian capitalists. So make sure we keep an eye on this anti-terrorism legislation that would be coming out, because if it's not coming out against racist Caucasian capitalists, we're going to be in trouble again. Stay focused. They are planning. We have to always be planning and organizing as well.
Okay. Let me make a comment just in the space of this question that I've been making for the last year. And I've been doing it for the last 4 decades and getting attacked by my own people. You know, when I was at City College, I would set up the tables with the applications to the police department and the fire departments and working with the Vulcans and the others. And the brothers just went to Zoom. I advocate that we should join the military and get trained. We're going to leave the training skills to your enemy. I still advocate that those of us who are not trained when we come out of high school, are not skilled enough to go to college, need to join the damn military. You can't be no worse enemy of our people than you are now. In the last 30 years, we've killed over 300,000 of our own people. So please stop that as an excuse. I say the best way to defeat the police is to become the police. Let's take them over. Let's form study group with civil service exams in our community, studying in the 9th grade, teach our kids to pass the sanitation design, the exams, police exam, fire exam, and EMS exams. Let's take over the primary institutions that run our communities. Those are the 2 things I've been recommending, and more aggressively over the last 3-4 months. And I'm still recommending that is a good way forward. That beats being in the penitentiary and having to turn to selling drugs and murder your people as the only alternative to surviving the streets you live on. And there is advantage. I served in the military, Oba served in the military. There is a lot of advantage. There's a disciplining you'll get. Weapon use and weapon expertise. Because many of us who were in the movement in the 60s, most people didn't know we were just back from Vietnam. Many of us was in the war and refused to fight in Vietnam. Many of those in the 50s were just back from the Second World War. They were the skilled, trained, armed men, proficient with weapons in our community. We didn't lose our mind or lose our race because we went in the military, just like nobody else does. The Latinos are using it very well and very strategically, okay? And when it comes to policing, if I'm going to have a police force in my community, and you are going to have one in America, then I want it black. Simple as that, or as black as it can be. And I think we need to focus on that. And I've been saying it over the last couple of months, and I'm going to escalate that. You want to take over your community, you got to take over economic, politics, and culture. Okay? If you're not thinking economic, politics, and culture, controlling land, labor, and resources where you have, because I don't think we need nobody to give us more land. We got enough land. We need to have a contiguous relationship between the lands we have. Nobody need to give us no money. We got money. But we don't control the institutions where we are. And so our enemies come into our majority black community and control our daily lives by controlling the institutions where we are.
Okay, so just before I go to the last question coming up, I just to give Elder Pepperkai. Would you like to say anything on that last point?
Unmute.
Hold on, yeah. Okay, you're off.
Yeah, just a few words. And those few words are organize now or perish. Because the clan, they're not no longer riding on horses and with sheets covered over the backs. They're in the police, they're in the military, they're in the strategic places. And as Brother Smart said, we need to there. But we must remember who we are.
I agree. Because part of being a part of military and police, especially police, because we can get access to the intelligence apparatus and the intelligent information flow, just like they're getting it on us. You know.
And as mentioned before, good book, Neely, Spook Who Sat by the Door. Good book to read. I remember when that movie came out in the United States, and 3 days later they eliminated it across the country. Took it out of every theater across the country. It was too powerful, and it still is. Same message.
Well, they've taken a play from that book. That's where the Klan's at. The Klan's in the police department. You know, the militias are in the police department. They're the EMS worker that come to your house when you're sick.
That's
They're the
right.
firemen that come to your house and let it burn down.
Yeah.
You know, we need to take those institutions back. Control the real estate we live on. Economic, politics, and culture. Land, labor, and resources.
Okay, so as we're coming to a close shortly, this is a final question I'd like to put to the panel. And what do you think of the Biden-Harris policy, would be the Biden-Harris policy towards Africa? What do you think there will be? Do you think there would be a situation they had under Obama when there was a lot of expectation and it turned out to not to be realized?
Well, let me start, and I know Oba has looked at this question, and I'm sure I see Kujichagulia smiling since you looked at this question. Right now, America's policy towards Africa is that of total imperialism, you know, and militarism. I remember the last thing Obama did when he was leaving the White House was sign the order that we could invade Somalia. He couldn't walk out without doing that because that was the assignment. Right now, AFRICOM is fully functional. The American military in Africa is fully functional. Second in numbers now only to the French military in Africa. And the French military in Africa is larger than the French military in France. Secondly, we use Africa as a launching base for most of our drones. I think 13 to 14 of those bases are still there. It is the American troops that's training the Fulanis and the Hausas that's causing the turmoil in now Nigeria, Cameroon, and Niger. There's a lot. You remember when the young black soldier got killed and nobody could explain what the hell he was doing in Niger? They got exposed, you know, and he probably got killed because he probably wouldn't go on. He probably flipped to the black side and they took him out because they never said what killed that young man. But they're there. I remember the Zbigniew Brzezinski paper, the white paper written under Jimmy Carter. Then he was the National Security Advisor or something, and he said the one thing that America policy towards Africa, the one most critical thing, was that African Americans and Africans should never be allowed to unite politically, culturally, and economically. That is the policy of the United States of America till this day. The other policy is that the American corporate imperialist marauders are still in Africa, in particular and especially in the Congo. And it has been the American government who have been training these deadly militias. It's their mercenaries they've hired, which are ex-American servicemen, to do it. And so even when the Congo voted to remove Kabila, it was America that stepped in and forced a co-presidency on the new government of the Congo, keeping Kabila in there. So we have to say and speak to and with the African Union. And the African Union is going to have to stop coming to America like beggars. Okay. And I know from a lot of the phone calls coming back and forth right now, everybody's looking to see, what can I get? What can I get? We need to say, we need a withdrawal of American imperialist corporate occupation of Africa in every country. And we need a withdrawal of your partnership. You know, when Britain left the European Union, because Britain wanted to be back in the catbird seat in terms of colonialism and imperialism. And they couldn't make that work, having to split with the rest of Europe. And they really think they can come back into Africa and take their high space. That's why they did what they did to Mugabe. You know, the government in Ghana, as smooth as Ghana is going, this government is backed by the Oppenheimer group out of South Africa. That's a link to the Bank of England and the Rothschild. So we have to be clear that it cannot be imperialism as usual in Africa. That you cannot come in and put in your militarists and then create with your, they have a thing called the USAID, United States Aid, but it's a front for the CIA. But what they do, they train African youth. They give out scholarships, you know, and then they bring them to America for lectures and other stuff. So they're training right in your face the insurgency that looks like you. So there's a lot of things we've got to look at. But the primary one is that the relationship of imperialist and exploitation backed by American intelligence and military must end in Africa. And there must be a transparency about any relationship we have with Africa, and not all of these clandestine agencies acting as NGOs, dominating, undergirding, and corrupting our society.
Okay, that's great. I'd like to turn now to Sister Kujichagulia. So what's your take on American policies towards Africa?
Well, Dr. Smalls just said it perfectly. They are determined to make sure that we never unite as one group of people. And a lot of us have begun to believe that insanity and do our best not to unite. In terms of looking towards the Biden administration or any administration ever, even if we have a Black president and a Black vice president, America is still America. Mm-hmm. The things that America wants to perpetuate and protect, racism, capitalism, white psychopathy, all these things aren't going to change, irrespective, you know, of the president or vice president. The people aren't going to change anything. They're just the mouthpiece. So it doesn't matter who is the president. It doesn't matter who the vice president is. America's policies towards Africa will not change. That's what has to be stopped. The names that we talk about of who occupies the seat in the White House, that's not who has the power to change things. The entire American government, the infrastructure, and most of all, the corporations that tell the CIA and the FBI and all these organizations what they should focus upon, those are the crucial points that we need to look at. And removing those corporations, those imperialists from Africa, is crucial in that, because again, that is all our land. We need to get them out. So looking at Biden and Harris to do that is, I think, very naive. That's something we have the power to do if we organize to do it. We have more power to get that done than they do. That's not their job. Their job is to protect America. They must do that. They took that oath to protect America and America's interest. And America's interest is always capitalism and overseas imperialism and eventually globalism. So if you're in office, you protected those oaths. That means it's up to us to organize, to get solidify our options, our program, and to move forward on that objective. We need to be looking at what we should be doing, what we can do. In 4 more years, we'll be talking about other names. Will those issues still be there? Yes. Racism will still be here. Imperialism will still be here. Globalism will still be here. Don't get caught up on the individuals. We need to be looking at these issues, what we can do to eradicate those issues. We need to be organizing.
Okay. And I'd just like to turn to Elder Pepperkai. Now you got a view on that question?
Well, again, brothers and my sister, not a lot to add from what has been said by Professor Small and our sister. And it's simply this, that Africa produced the resources that drives the entire planet. Mm-hmm. America is getting weaker and they're going down, but the latter is going to give up. It's like a kick from a dying horse. They'll still be there, exerting the power and grabbing those resources. And as the sister said, whoever is president or vice president, their job, their responsibility is to ensure that America has got access to all that material. And the question is, what do we do to protect our own resources? All leaders believe that they're small boys, beggars, hoping and praying, instead of taking responsibility of our homeland. So, as the sister rightfully said, it's not what we expect. That be foolish on our part. It's what we must do to secure our own future, our own resources.
Okay, and yeah, finally, just to sum up, I'd like to turn now to Dr. Obati Shaka. The same, what's your take on that question?
Well, as a Pan-Africanist most of my life, and one that's been involved in African work, working in African villages in Tanzania, African liberation support work, and seeing that there's a connection between the struggle of Africans in the U.S., the struggles of Africans on the continent, the struggle of Africans in the world. So I would say a number of things that a lot of this has got to do with what our movements do and the pressure that our movements bring to bear on the system in this country to produce change. One of them is movements, including Black Lives Matter, should eventually look at, and other movements, developing an international agenda. And one of those international agendas, Professor Smalls has already referred to, which is demilitarize African policy in Africa. Take all military bases, all military presence out of Africa. Take it out. Of course, in some ways, this is actually in America's interest, because actually America's pursuing a very stupid policy in Africa. And in some ways, stupid policies, while it hurts Africa, it also hurts America. Chinese are showing you the smart way is to go economic. You know, the smart way is to bring in development and make it look like it's in Africa's interest, while you are taking out a whole lot of resources at the same time. That's a smart way. And now China has a military base in Africa, and that should be removed. The second one is neoliberalism is at the heart of what's really doing in people around the world, which is privatizing everything in sight. So in Africa, that took the form of structural adjustment. And so in the 80s, African countries were told, if you're going to get aid, you need to sell off your resources and sell them off cheap. I was in Ghana in the 80s, and the diamond, the gold mines in Ghana were being run by the British. I asked a cab driver, what do you think of that? He said, well, the people here are dishonest. I said, yeah, you think that these white people are? You know what I mean? So those kinds of things, structural adjustment, took Africans out of free medical care, free education, providing services to the people, and at the same time delivering the resources to the rich. Now the World Bank and International Monetary Fund is saying that was a mistake. It wasn't a mistake. Now it produced the desired results. Everybody sees it. So now they want to move to another level, pull it out. This is the big thing that I think our policy should be directed at. The biggest problem in Africa is that when Africa became independent, it inherited the European nation state model, and it never questioned it. We use the Marxist analysis and we'll say neocolonialism problem, which is correct. There is indirect economic control that is still operating all over the world and in Africa. But one reason it can operate is that Africa, because of the disruption of its culture through the slave trade and colonialism, lost confidence in itself, especially African leaders, to the point that they inherited a model for ruling their country that they never even questioned. And even our best leaders never questioned it. Nkrumah didn't, Nyerere didn't. And I think Nyerere had the best answers for Africa, but he never questioned that nation state model. That nation state model killed the Zujima villages because the Africans who were working with Nyerere, in 1967, I met Nyerere. We had a meeting for a couple hours outside of his home. Pan-African People's Organization was working to set up some programs in Tanzania, and it was the best set of meetings I've ever had with anybody. Nyerere was clear, humble, smart, and was working for Africa's development. And he had Ujima villages, and those villages were building up an agricultural base for the economy, putting in healthcare, putting in schools, all free, and at the same time agriculture and building housing. And this was being done in a successful way. The leadership around Nyerere, African leaders undermined it, not Nyerere. And when I met with Nyerere, he said, I could have had this country rule with the help of whites, but I wanted to prove that blacks could rule. But these blacks that ruled were Bwana mentality, big shot. Bwana means the big shot. They had the idea that people didn't know anything, and they believed really only white people did. And so that Ujima village thing was frustrated in part by that misleadership and in part by external forces, IMF, World Bank, all these things that they relied on for external funding. But they could have run that economy without those national leaders. In fact, they would have done better without a nation state if it had to be a European model, because the European nation state model is one designed to take the wealth out of Africa, stick some of it in the pocket of the elite, but most of it send it abroad to your colonial masters, your neocolonial masters, and it is maintained through force and violence. So my point is this. Our policies towards Africa as African people in the diaspora and Africans on the continent, as they become aware of this, should be based on dismantling that model without saying so. And one of the ways you dismantle this model to begin with is this country is for democracy. We should be for that. It's just a word we should put in front of it, African democracy. And this is called the perfect strategy, by the way. It's a hard one to argue against. And the way you argue it is this. In order for this nation state to operate for us, one of the things that has to happen is we have to have a sense where the African decision-making system is put back in play. It already exists in the villages. That's consensus. The villages in many parts of Africa operate on that. That's the African decision-making model. At the national level, when the nation's large, you have to be creative in how that works. Traditional African systems had consensus of councils, and they were representative of the best people who were on the national council. So we have to adapt that to today. That's work for people on the continent, figure out how they do that, take their own tradition and update them. But the key point is this. African women must be empowered. Not only African women, but conscious and just African women just as the men who are empowered must be conscious and just African men. By the way, that's in my book. The mother principle is called Twin Lineal Democracies. Shaka Diop called it bicameral nations. Not just male-female balance, but just male-female balance.
That's right.
And on key decisions, the people make the decisions. Now let Africa do that. You don't even have to say that. But the overall policy, ours should be about that. And the first one is empowering the people. Policies to empower the people. And right now, you raise it around African women. And I'm trying to oppose that one. And that should be something that comes from the grassroots. And that's one that's put on the government. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of other stuff, but one other, cultural renaissance. We need a new African cultural renaissance in this country. We had a Afrocentric cultural renaissance in the 80s and 90s. We need to continue that, but we need a new African cultural renaissance where we raise up the best features of our culture. That needs to be tied into an African cultural renaissance, where we talk about what are the best features of each of our cultures that we need to draw from, and how can we apply it? And that needs to be dialogues and whatnot, but it needs to be put into application in our communities, because we need to rebuild our communities. Africa's flat on its back, and it needs rebuilding as well. There's a lot of other stuff, but that's some of it.
Right. Unfortunately, we have come to an end. Time's more or less beaten us. But I'd just like to say it's been an honor and a pleasure today to have had these brilliant minds with us. Professor Small, Dr. Shaka, and Sister Kujichagulia. And on behalf of the PSCM,
Pepper Guy now, you talk like he ain't a brilliant mind. Pepper Guy,
our elder.
Yes, Pepper Guy. Well, Pepper Guy knows he's included because Pepper Guy is on the inside.
I know.
So Pepper Guy, just to say to people, he's a brother was one of the founder members of the Pan-African Congress movement when it started in 1974. As people know, he was one of the co-founders of Head Start Bookshop, based in London, that ran for many, many years. And now he's the founder of the Mama Art Center, which is still, and he's still the largest book distributor in this country, probably in Europe. So we can see well over 40 years, he's been, deep in the struggle, and he's helped the minds of so many African people here in London and throughout the UK and throughout many other countries as well. So Elder Pepper Guy, as you know, the PSCM owes you a lot, and the PSCM always honor you and love you. And we know you'll keep going from strength to strength. Yes, I'll come through.
Yeah, just one quick point, Brother Tasha. No, Brother Shaka mentioned just one book, but Brother Shaka has written 5 books. The Integration Chapter Generation Gap.
Oh, I love that one.
In fact, I need to read it because I have a lot of problem with the younger brothers and sisters. So I must read this myself. In fact, right here in Britain, in the Black Studies program, this book is one of the main book, along with the second volume. Now, his other book, The Political Legacy of Malcolm X, is out of print, but that will be coming back soon. But I just want to draw one point with Professor Small. Professor Small, this is a plea. We're begging you, we're asking you to bring one book out, and that is about the Nicene Conference.
Oh.
Because we need to understand how this whole Christian farad came into existence.
Yes.
And dominate and cripple our minds. Because we're talking about God in charge, Jesus Christ gonna do this, all heap of nonsense. And we wanted to bring clarity in a grassroots way, so we understand how this whole system of white dominance impact on our mind and turn us upside down and turn us crazy. And we know that you have the knowledge, all the understanding that you can put together to give our people a way out of this madness that we find ourselves in. So we're charging you with that responsibility. It's light work for you. We know you have a lot to do, but put that on your agenda.
I would love to see that.
Do it.
Please.
I actually am working on something, and it's going to include the genesis of what we call Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. And it's going to be called African Sacred Science. But it's going to take some time. Someone is transcribing a lot of my lectures now. They just begun 2 weeks ago that I've done on that subject over the years. So hopefully by summer, should be done.
Oh, great.
Glad to hear, my brother. Glad to hear. I can go to my bed happy.
I don't want you going to no bed right now, Papa. Because we still need to,
Okay. So once again, I'd like to thank all those who tuned in today, and I'm sure you have had a true masterclass. And PSCM will endeavor to keep bringing you this quality and standard of brothers and sisters who are at the top of their game. We have been doing it for over 45 years, and we will continue to do it. So Dr. Shaka, Professor Small, and Sister Kujichagulia, like I'm saying, in your case, Kujichagulia, this is just a start of a great journey. We were hoping to do a lot more with you, because we do put on major meetings. So you'll be hearing from us again. Don't worry about that. So as we come to an end now, it is our tradition to end like how we start. So I'd like to call upon Ndugri Mani to change the vibration in ending this meeting for us.
Okay. Asante Nisana, Ndugu Tahaka has said everything regarding the respect and the masterclass that we just received. And so I couldn't add more, and about our debt of unpayable debt to MZ Pepekai, and we still learn from and still grow with. So we began the Mabadiliko Ya Nishati, and we'll end the ritual. So we'll bring it to a close. We opened the ritual, and now we'll close it. So Ndugu, I'm going to share my screen.
Okay.
Okay, let me know when everyone can see that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, Asante Sana. Okay, so in the same way that we opened up the ritual and understanding that we are one vibration with the all. The all is expressed in multiple ways, and as Baba Smalls has taught us, that we are divine beings having a divine human experience, and that vibration, we are one with all things, and we can call upon that power in all aspects, in all dimensions, in all times. There is no time. There is only the divine presence now that we can call upon, and call upon that energy and power. And as Dada Kujichagulia was saying that, and also as MZ Shaka was saying, that we don't understand our own power. And these rituals and this way of being, as I said, it's not spirituality, it's a way of being, it's a way of life, is calling upon that power, is being comfortable with that power, and understanding it and being consciously able to draw upon it. That's our magic. Our magic is simply understanding ourselves and understanding our power and being able to call upon it. So in the same way that we opened, we're now going to use be one with the vibration. And the spirit tells me to ring the triangle chime, again, that spiritual object and shape. We'll ring it 8 times. 8 for the, as it spiritually means, eternity. It also means power and protection. And so, and giving birth from that supreme darkness. So we're going to ring it 8 times. We'll allow the vibration to go around us, through us, and over us. But at the same time, we'll be thinking of gratitude and recognition of the all that we connected with. There's always part of us. That is us. Of the powers, aspects of the Creator that underpin all things. And the ancestors that we call who are in our presence. And we're asking now that they take our objectives and our intentions. Everything comes from intention. We must act. When we act, we take a step towards the ancestors and they take 10 towards us. By coming together as a spiritual act, by having the intention, we ask that they take their intentions to their realms and help them to manifest. But we do so with thanks and appreciation as we bring this gathering to an end through the ritual in fraternal love and peace. So I'll ring it 8 times. Sit straight to wherever you are, feet flat on the floor, palm of your hands on your thighs. Breathe deeply and allow the vibration to resonate with you. Okay, and I'll begin and counting Kiswahili to keep time. Moja. Mbili. Tatu. Nne. Tano. Sita. Saba. Nane. So it's a vibration 8 times for power, and coming into our own power. We now use the vibration of our voice again to state the affirmation and words of power on screen. So we bring them into manifestation and invoke them from within ourselves. So thus, please follow after me. Nguvu zote.
Nguvu zote.
Kwa watu wetu.
Kwa watu wetu.
Mapenzi ya wote.
Mapenzi ya wote.
Ni mapenzi yetu.
Ni
mapenzi yetu.
Hakuna mwanzo.
Hakuna mwanzo.
Na hakuna mwisho.
Na
hakuna mwisho.
And in the Kemetic, Anuk, Amen.
Anuk,
Amen.
All power to our people. The will of the all is our will. There is no beginning and there is no end. I am. Amen. Asanteni sana, Jamal. Thanks very much, family.
Okay, asante sana, Ndugu Imani, for that. And once again, I'd like to thank Professor Small, over to Shaka and Sister Kujichagulia for being with us today. And also I'd like to thank all those who tuned in today. And, because we thank you for your support. You're here every week with us. So thank you again for being with us today. So until next week, when we'll be back again with another dynamic interesting presentation. I bid all watching Kwaheri.